Chapter 2549. Boss Ning, is that Ning Beixian? Xing Qiu looked at Ning Qi in astonishment. He felt that after living for so many years, this was the first time he had broadened his horizons. Almost as soon as Leng Yuan opened his mouth, they already believed him. Because at the birthday banquet, Ning Qi had personally admitted that he knew Bei Xiao and Bei Meng's master, and at this moment, their eldest senior brother and eldest senior sister were standing next to Leng Yuan. How could it be Ning Beixian? No matter how strong Ning Beixian is, there's no way he could have killed master with a single slash. Ruozhen muttered to himself, his eyes filled with confusion. White Bones was his biggest backer. Now that White Bones was dead, he didn't know what would happen to him today. Ning Beixian. Chen Huan and Yan Jingfeng looked at each other in shock. When Chen Huan was young, Yan Jingfeng had come to Bluestone Town once. That night, he told her many stories about deities, including the #1 prodigy of the ancestral star, Ning Beixian, who killed a Grand Luo with a single arrow. At that time, Chen Huan had said that Ning Qi and Yan Jingfeng had the same surname, but Yan Jingfeng had replied that it was just the same surname. The scene played out in front of them like a video. Chen Huan couldn't believe that the Uncle Qi she had been calling him for so many years was the main character of the story, the top prodigy of the ancestral planet, Ning Beixian. How could such an existence live in Bluestone Town for so many years like a mortal, and even established an incomparably deep relationship with his family? After all, Chen Asen was just an ordinary mortal. Didn't they say that immortals and mortals were different? Yan Jingfeng was even more in disbelief. However, the scene of Ning Qi stabbing White Bone to death was absolutely true. He had to believe it even if he didn't want to. Master is Ning Beixian, the #1 heavenly talent who has been missing for many years? Oh my God! Big brother, I'm not dreaming, am I? Bei Meng looked at Bei Xiao in disbelief. Bei Xiao stared blankly at Ning Qi's back, then at the person who had spoken. It was their master, Leng Yuan. In the end, she shook her head at Bei Meng and said, "Little sister, you're not dreaming. I'm afraid our master is really that person. Have you forgotten that our master was knocked out by someone with 3 strikes of the rod? The one with the stick is the master." He finally understood why Ning Qi said that he was old friends with Leng Yuan. If he really wanted to argue about the relationship between the two of them, it would truly be a story that Leng Yuan couldn't bear to recall. As for the other people of Bluestone Town, they actually didn't know much about Ning Beixian. They looked at Ning Qi in confusion and thought to themselves, could this be Boss Ning's real name? On the side of the Xianjian sect, when Leng Yuan said those words, other than the old man of mysterious sword, everyone else became excited. Shi Yifan, Nailan Shiji, He Zhe, Li Zhangtong, Ing Jinshuan, Jiu Jian, Luo Bo, regardless of whether it was the Ascension sect's geniuses or the Xianjian sect's geniuses, they all looked to Ning Qi with expressions of disbelief. Is it really junior apprentice brother Ning? That's impossible, right? Kongwen sucked in a breath of cold air and subconsciously looked at Elder Pei beside him. This time, Elder Pei was the leader of Yuqing sect's team. Yuqing sect's ancestor was in closed-door cultivation in the sect and didn't come here. Constable Ning? People from the royal family of Yingzhou were also present. Many of them were members of the Sky Arrestor sect. Hearing Leng Yuan's words, almost everyone, including the Emperor of Yingzhou, was dumbfounded. How could it be Ning Beixian? Ning Beixian is just an earth immortal. He was removed from the first place of the heavenly Tao ranking the last time it was updated. How could it be him? Could he have ascended to the heavenly immortal realm? That's impossible. His name isn't on the heavenly immortal ranking either. Even if he did, how could he kill Bai Gu with a single strike? It would make sense if he used that bow. The Grand Luo present were shocked and filled with all kinds of doubts. Most of them were still unwilling to believe that the old man before them was Ning Beixian. If that was the case, then their worldview had been completely overturned. In the void, That's Ning Beixian? By Xingxue Ji Shan, Mr. Li Si, didn't you say that Ning Beixian relied on a bow that might be a high-grade Dao artifact to kill Jiang Wei? But now, he's using an ordinary longsword to kill a Grand Luo. That's right. Maybe that golden immortal from the Wind and Cloud sect mistook him for someone else. The dozen or so Grand Luo who came to the homeworld after Jiang Wei's death all looked at Bai Xingxue and the other two because they were the only ones who had seen Ning Qi. Junior sister, is he Ning Beixian? Bai Xingxue looked at Li Xian with a solemn expression. He was not too sure about Ning Qi's identity, and Li Xian was the only one who might know. Everyone looked at Li Xian when they saw that. Li Xian's lips curled into a beautiful smile. It should be him. You've changed so much in 100 years. Bai Xingxue looked at Ning Qi and forced a smile, but he could not help but clench his fists. After all, even he was not confident that he could block Ning Qi's sword. Ling Yuan, are you sure you're not mistaken? The Wind and Cloud sect's old ancestor looked at Ling Yuan. I'm not mistaken. I would recognize him even if he turns into ashes. Ling Yuan shook his head faintly, his eyes never leaving Ning Qi. Ning Qi smiled and walked out step by step. With every step he took, his face became younger, and the wrinkles on his skin decreased at a rate visible to the naked eye. His originally thin and withered body also began to fill out. After Ning Qi took 10 steps, his face could no longer be found. There were no signs of aging, and he looked exactly like a 17 or 18-year-old youth with handsome facial features and fair skin. Chen Huan could not help but tear up when he saw Ning Qi's current appearance. It's Uncle Qi. It's Uncle Qi. Ning Qi's current appearance was exactly the same as when he first met Ning Qi as a child in his memory. There was no difference at all. Apart from Chen Huan, many elders in Bluestone Town remembered what Ning Qi looked like back then, and their hearts were stirred when they saw Ning Qi reverting to his youthful appearance. In these 10 steps, Ning Qi seemed to have walked through time, reminding them of the changes in Bluestone Town over the years. In the end, he brought them back to that time. At that time, there were not so many people in Bluestone Town, and their lives were not very good. However, at that time, everyone was very young. However, everyone was still young and full of longing. Master was so handsome when he was young. Bei Meng subconsciously mumbled to herself. Ling Yuan, you won't remember me if I really turn into ashes. Ning Qi looked at Ling Yuan and smiled. After a pause, Ning Qi glanced at the crowd, sweeping his gaze across the familiar faces and said softly, "Everyone, it's been a while." Apart from a select few, the rest of the Grand Luo present were left in shock. It really was Ning Beixian. It had only been 100 years, but how could Ning Beixian kill a Grand Luo so easily? Big brother! Ingzhen turned into a stream of light and appeared before Ning Qi with an excited expression. Then, another figure descended from the sky. It was Li Xian. Chapter 25:51. The next day. Limestone Town. Yesterday's events had passed, and the various Grand Luo returned to Liang City with a bellyful of questions. However, there were more prodigies who stayed behind in Bluestone Town. Perhaps it was because of Li Xian, or perhaps they wanted to learn more about Ning Qi's sword, but Bai Xingxue and the others had stayed behind as well. He had the intention to return to Liang City. The sudden influx of immortals made Bluestone Town livelier than before. However, the people of Bluestone Town found that these immortals were much more polite to mortals. Their words were no longer as cold as before. They knew that all of this was because of one person. The courtyard that Ning Qi was staying in wasn't big and couldn't accommodate too many people. Thus, there were only Old Man Mysterious Sword, Old Ancestor Qi Yao, Ingzhen, Elder Pei, Kong Wen, Li Xian, and a few other old acquaintances. Among them, there was one person with the most special identity, Wind and Cloud Sect's Ling Yuan. "Brat Ning, have you been staying here all these years?" Qi Yao looked around, a strange expression on his face. Going into seclusion was fine, but if he really lived here like a mortal for nearly 100 years, how boring would that be? Ning-Chi smiled and nodded. Old Man Mysterious Sword looked thoughtful and suddenly said, Ji Wulo of the Yixian sect said that the second tomb of the god of sin might appear here. Did you already know about it? Coincidence. Ning-Chi shook his head with a smile. I found a secluded place at random. Who would have thought that after a few decades, this place would suddenly become lively? It was also through the conversations of others that I learned that the second tomb of the god of sin might appear here. Ning-Chi's explanation was very reasonable, but everyone's eyes revealed a trace of disbelief. However, seeing that Ning-Chi didn't want to talk about it, they didn't ask. Since it's a coincidence, perhaps everything is destined. Since the mystic sect has sent a grand luo to this second divine tomb, it's easy to imagine that the item inside might be much more valuable than the bow you obtained back then, Old Man Mysterious Sword said meaningfully. That was not Old Man Mysterious Sword's guess alone. When Ji Wulyo of the Yixian sect appeared on the ancestral star, everyone felt that the second divine tomb might contain the treasure that the Yixian sect's sect master had mentioned. More precious than a high-grade Dao artifact? Ning-Chi nodded thoughtfully. The probability of finding the fairy-slaying gourd in the second tomb of the god of sin was indeed higher. Chi Yao, let's return to Liang City, and let these youngsters catch up. Old Man Mysterious Sword waved at Chi Yao. Chi Yao still wanted to ask about that sword and was unwilling to leave. However, seeing how determined Old Man Mysterious Sword was, he had no choice but to leave with him. He planned to ask Ning-Chi about it when he was free. That sword made him think of that old man, and he believed that the other Grand Luo had thought of the same thing as well. Junior brother, we'll be leaving first. When you're free, come find us in Liang City. Kong Wen cupped his hands at Ning-Chi and left with Elder Pei and the others. He really wanted to ask if Ning-Chi had mastered the 8-9 arcane art. After all, Ning-Chi had shocked him too much this time. He had a feeling that Ning-Chi might have mastered the 8-9 arcane art. However, now was not the time to talk. He knew that Ning-Chi still had some things to do. The small courtyard became much emptier, but it also allowed Chen Huan and the others to breathe a sigh of relief. They had felt too much pressure when standing with Old Man Mysterious Sword and the others. Although Old Man Mysterious Sword and the others had deliberately concealed their auras, there was still a sliver of their aura that they could not conceal. It was a natural aura that came with it, but it made Chen Huan and the others feel very heavy. Little Huan, what are your plans for the future? Ning-Chi smiled at Chen Huan. Chen Huan looked a little hesitant, but then he said with a resolute gaze, Uncle Chi, I plan to stay in Bluestone Town. This is my father's last wish. However, when Uncle Chi leaves, can you bring little Shi and the others with you? Chen Huan's wife smiled and held Chen Huan's arm. Father, Chen Shi wanted everyone to follow Ning-Chi and cultivate together. That way they could be together for a long time, but he did not expect his father to choose to stay in Bluestone Town. Yes, this is indeed your father's last wish. Since you're staying here, then guard Bluestone Town well from now on. Ning-Chi smiled. Guard? When the others heard this, they already knew that it would not be long before Chen Huan's Qi refinement realm cultivation level would rise. Little Shi, when this matter is over, follow me back to Mystic Sword Sect's Missing Moon Peak. Ning-Chi looked at Chen Shi and his wife. Chen Shi's wife was pleasantly surprised, but she looked at Chen Shi. Only if Chen Shi agreed would it count. After all, Chen Huan did not plan to leave Bluestone Town. Go. After you become an immortal, you can come back to visit me and your mother often. Chen Huan nodded at Chen Shi. Can I really come back often? Chen Shi muttered to himself, feeling a little hesitant. Yingzhou is not too far from Juku State. Ying Zhenxuan smiled. If you want to come back in the future, you'll be there in a year or two. Hearing this, Chen Shi made up his mind. He knew that this opportunity was not easy to come by. Only by leaving with Ningqi could the Chen family develop into a cultivation family in the future. This was an opportunity that mortals would not even dare to imagine for generations. Since the journey between the two places was only a year or two, she felt relieved. The worries in his heart disappeared, and he nodded in agreement. In fact, if he really knew how far away the Bluestone town was from the Xianjian sect, he would probably be shocked. To mortals, even if they walked for 100 years, they would not be able to reach this distance. Yan Jingfeng's face was filled with envy, but he did not dare to say a word, because he knew that Ningqi was only on good terms with Chen Asen's family, and his relationship with him was very ordinary. If he spoke rashly, it would only make the other party feel disgusted. However, to be able to see Chen Huan, Chen Shi and the others obtain such a fortuitous encounter, Yan Jingfeng felt happy for them. To be happy. As for you, you have other opportunities, so I won't interfere. Ningqi glanced at Yan Jingfeng indifferently. What? Yan Jingfeng was slightly startled, and then his heart started to beat wildly. Since Ningqi said that he had another fortuitous encounter, then he definitely had another fortuitous encounter. Leng Yuan, after going around in circles, you actually accepted these two little fellows as your disciples. It can be said that there is a special kind of fate between us, right? After everything was arranged, Ningqi looked at Leng Yuan and said with a smile. Bei Xiao and Bei Meng stood between the two of them with strange expressions on their faces. Ever since they found out about Ningqi's identity, they had been worried that their master and Ningqi would have some sort of conflict. With Ningqi's strength, if there really was a conflict, the one kneeling would definitely be their master. This kind of fate. Chapter 25:52. Does Bei Xiao and Bei Meng acknowledging me as their master have anything to do with you? Leng Yuan asked after a moment of silence. Although Ningqi was only a perfected sky immortal, his terrifying methods made Leng Yuan feel like he was facing the ancestor of Zenith Heaven. Thus, he wasn't sure if Ningqi had arranged for him to accept Bei Xiao and Bei Meng as his disciples. If so, what was his motive? That's their own fortune. Why? If you don't want them, I'll bring them back to the Mystic Sword sect. Ningqi said with a faint smile. Leng Yuan heaved a sigh of relief. Knowing that this had nothing to do with Ningqi, he smiled. They're talented. If you want to take them away, you'll have to kill me. Master. Bei Xiao and Bei Meng's eyes were filled with worry. The two looked at Ningqi pleadingly. They knew that if Ningqi really wanted to kill Leng Yuan, it would only take one strike. Since you value them so much, I have to warn you. Your other two disciples aren't good people. If I find out one day that they're secretly opposing Bei Xiao and Bei Meng, I might really have to take my sword to the Wind and Cloud sect. Ningqi smiled faintly. Leng Yuan's expression changed slightly, then he nodded. I know what I'm doing. If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave. Then, he looked at Bei Xiao and Bei Meng. Are you leaving? Master, Bei Xiao and Bei Meng had planned to take care of Ningqi until he died, but now that Ningqi's cultivation was higher than theirs and his lifespan was longer than theirs, there was no need to mention it anymore. However, they couldn't bear to part with Ningqi. Go. Ningqi smiled and waved his hand. The two bowed to Ningqi solemnly before leaving with Leng Yuan. Jinchuan's sharp eyes saw a flash of jealousy in Leng Yuan's eyes. You're going to the White Bone sect next, right? Li Xian waited for Leng Yuan to leave before asking. If everything goes well, I'll be back soon. You guys can stay here for now. Ningqi smiled and nodded. No one doubted his words at all. Whitebones was dead, and even if the Whitebones sect had a superior sect, they would still send a Grand Luo. There was no way they would be a match for Ningqi, and after the incident with the Jiang family, no other mystic immortal had come to the homeworld. Ningqi's every move could be said to have been seen by the Grand Luo of the various sections. Most importantly, Ningqi did not hide his whereabouts. After asking for the location of the White Bone sect, he left. About a month later, Ning Qi reappeared in Bluestone Town. By then, the Grand Luo had also received news of the Bleached Bone sect's fall. The Jade Clear ancestral patriarch annihilated the Jiang family and Ning Beixian annihilated the White Bone sect. Both of them are fiends that we can't afford to offend. I heard that there was another Grand Luo in the White Bone sect who died to Ning Beixuan's sword. That's a Grand Luo sent by the Shrine of Bone to the homeworld. I wonder how many of the 400,000 disciples managed to escape. It's useless. Now that White Bones is dead, the White Bone sect will be crippled. All the experts above the sky immortal level will be dead. Even if a few Earth immortals or human immortals manage to escape, what can they do? Seek revenge after 1,000,000 years of seclusion? I'm afraid Ning Beixian would no longer be on the homeworld by then. The destruction of the White Bone sect had made the immortals on the homeworld deeply understand Ning Qi's method. Many Grand Luo, who once wanted to obtain the immortal Slayer bow from Ning Qi, had already given up on the idea. They believed that even Bai Xingxue and the other prodigies on the homeworld were no match for Ning Qi. They were the only ones who could defeat him. Of Ning Qi's Grand Luo, there was only Ji Wuliu of the exotic mystic sect. After all, the exotic mystic sect was so mysterious that no one knew how many Dao fruits Ji Wuliu had condensed, whether he was an early stage or full-fledged golden immortal in Bluestone Town. Bai Xingxue and the others had bought a house not far from Ning Qi's residence. Bai Xingxue, what's the relationship between that junior sister of yours and Ning Beixian? Does she know which sect or faction Ning Beixian comes from, and who his master is? Li Si frowned as he looked at Bai Xingxue. Ji Shan and the other geniuses also turned their gazes to Bai Xingxue. During this period of time, they had used all sorts of methods, wanting to get to the bottom of Ning Qi's background. However, they could only find out that Ning Qi first appeared in the 9-sect alliance arena of the ancient heavenly court. There were no more clues before that. But no clues was still a clue, and at least it proved that Ning Qi's background was not that simple. What can I do if my junior sister doesn't want to say? Bai Xingxue said a little impatiently. He had thought that Ning Qi was no longer a threat to him, but now that Ning Qi had reappeared and possessed some kind of immortal art that could easily kill a Grand Luo, Bai Xingxue felt a lot of pressure. Everyone looked at each other thoughtfully when they saw Bai Xingxue's current state. Li Si wanted to scold him, since he recognized that Ning Qi's physique and aptitude was a notch higher than Bai Xingxue's, but he kept his mouth shut after some thought. Let's go and ask them ourselves. Maybe we'll know. Ji Shan suddenly said. Go and ask them ourselves? Everyone looked at each other, a little tempted. Previously, because they were afraid of Ning Qi's sword, they did not want to have any direct contact with Ning Qi, afraid that they would be stabbed to death by Ning Qi's sword. But now that they thought about it, they had no enmity with Ning Beixian, and he would not stab them to death, so they could try to befriend him. Because of Ji Shan, everyone was suddenly enlightened. Li Si was the first to stand up. Then let's go and pay a visit. After all, we are Grand Luo prodigies. Ning Beixian, a perfected heaven immortal, should give us some face. Bai Xingxue's expression was a little ugly. Previously, he wanted to kill Ning Qi, and now he was going to pay a visit? To Bai Xingxue, this was a formless humiliation. Bai Xingxue, are you leaving? Li Si frowned. Of course, why not? Bai Xingxue smiled coldly, got up, and walked toward Ning Qi's courtyard with everyone. Ever since the people of Bluestone Town knew Ning Qi's identity, the sword shop was closed, but they could often see Ning Qi strolling around Bluestone Town with the two fairies. Many old people of Bluestone Town finally understood why Ning Qi rejected everyone who came to propose. With Ying Jinxuan and Li Xian's beauty and their status as fairies, how could those ordinary women compare to them? Boss Ning. Chapter 2553. Bai Xingxue stood behind Li Si. Seeing that Li Xian didn't even look at him, he couldn't help but feel some evil anger rise in his heart. However, he hid it well and no one noticed. Profound Azure Mansion, Li Si. Ning Qi had once met him when Anxious Ghost fought Jiang Wei. Now that he heard this name again, he could not help but be slightly moved. Profound Azure Mansions Li Si, Profound Azure Mansions Xiao Xiao, these two should be the same person, right? It's a genius from the Profound Azure Mansion, nice to meet you. Ning Qi cupped his hands. Although there was a smile on his face, Bai Xingxue and the others could see that the smile on Ning Qi's face was fake, so fake that even mortals could see through it. There was no reason for this. As an immortal, even if he didn't like it, as long as it was necessary, he could show an incomparably sincere smile. Ning Beixian and Li Si are enemies? Ji Shan and the others thought to themselves as their eyes twitched. Li Si was naturally aware of this. The smile on his face froze for a moment before it dissipated by quite a bit. He said in a somewhat cold voice, "Have I met Brother Ning before?" "Never seen him before." Ning Qi smiled. Her smile was still so fake. Oh, Li Si suddenly didn't know what to say. If there's nothing else, don't cross. Ning Qi cupped his fists and let Ing Zhenxuan and Li Xian pass the crowd. Li Si stared coldly at Ning Qi's back. No one knew what he was thinking. One of them suddenly said, "This kid is very arrogant. Did he forget that he's a perfected heavenly immortal just because he has some tricks up his sleeve?" The expressions of the others didn't look too good. When Bai Xingxue saw this scene, his mood suddenly became much better. He looked at Ning Qi's back and sneered in his heart. There's no harm in being arrogant, but it's slightly troublesome to offend so many grand heavenly realm geniuses because of it. Li Si suddenly lowered his head and took out the heavenly talisman. "The king sent me to patrol the mountains to request a friend request." Him. Li Si was taken aback for a moment before he clicked accept with a cold expression. He wanted to see what this mad dog wanted from him. Back then, on the All Heavens Forum, he and the king sent me to patrol the mountain, and they had a lot of quarrels. "Oh, so you're not dead yet." When Li Si saw this message, his expression changed. He was just about to reply when the other party had already blacklisted him. Ning Qi smiled when he felt the spiritual qi fluctuation behind him. He was sure that this Profound Azure Mansion's Li Si was the servant of Profound Azure Mansion. Because of Little Six, he didn't have a good impression of the Profound Azure Mansion. If possible, he was very willing to help Little Six erase the Profound Azure Mansion from the heavenly ancient immortal realm. "Maybe I can go to the Profound Azure Mansion after I understand the Third Sword Manual," Ning Qi muttered to himself. The Emotion Destroyer Sword Art had 9 sword manuals. The first sword could kill a Grand Luo, the second sword could kill a Mystic Immortal, and the third sword could even kill a Grand Unity True Immortal. If this continued, then the fourth sword would be able to slay a Celestial Monarch, and the fifth sword would be able to slay an Celestial Emperor. However, this was only Ning Qi's deduction. Only by reaching that level would he know the true power of the Emotion Destroyer swordsmanship. If his deduction was correct, how terrifying would it be to cultivate to the 9th sword? "Big brother, the scenery here is really beautiful." The three of them walked to a mountain on the outskirts of Bluestone Town. From here, they could vaguely see Liang City in the distance. They could see the entire Bluestone Town. However, this scenery was much inferior to the Mystic Sword sect. Ing Zhenxuan had never climbed the mountain step by step like a mortal, so she had this completely different feeling today. "Is it beautiful?" Li Xian was slightly startled. Looking at the scenery in front of her, she seemed to have thought of something and fell into deep thought. Perhaps it had been many years since she stood on the mountain and looked at the scenery so leisurely. The three of them did not speak. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the silence was broken by the sound of footsteps. The three of them turned around and saw an old man in a green robe. His green robe wasn't like the one Ji Wulia wore, It was a real green robe made of coarse cloth. Did I disturb you guys? The old man cupped his hands at the three of them. Old mister, this mountain doesn't belong to the three of us. How is it disturbing? Ning Chi smiled and cupped his hands. Li Xian frowned. You're immortal. This mountain is thousands of feet tall, but you're not sweating at all? Ing Zhenxuan immediately reacted after Li Xian's reminder. A trace of fear flashed in her eyes as she stared coldly at the old man. If the other party really didn't come with good intentions, their only target could only be Ning Chi. Or perhaps the remnants of the White Bone sect were here to take revenge. Your surname is Li, right? The old man suddenly looked at Li Xian and smiled. Li Xian was startled. There weren't many people on Ancestral Star who knew her surname. She didn't remember where she had seen this old man before, so she became even more cautious. But with Ning Chi by her side, she wasn't too afraid. Where did you know? Li Xian said coldly. Do you want to know? You'll find out in the future. I'm here today to have a chat with this little brother. The old man in cyan smiled and pointed at Ning Chi. Zhenxuan, Li Xian, you guys go down first. Wait for me in the yard. Ning Chi smiled. Okay. Li Xian nodded and pulled Ing Zhenxuan, who didn't want to leave, toward Bluestone Town. Sister Li Xian, big brother might be in danger. With Beishuan's strength, if the other party can really kill him, he can also kill you and me. Staying there will only make him afraid. Li Xian said calmly. Ing Zhenxuan calmed down when she heard that. She knew that she was too worried. On the mountain, after the two girls left, the old man looked at Ning Chi with a faint smile. After 5 minutes he smiled and said, You have a smell that I hate, really? I remember I took a shower yesterday. Ning Chi stretched out his sleeve and sniffed. I smelled it when you came to Ancestral Star. I wanted to see what you would do, but I didn't expect you to ask Xianjian for the Love Destroyer sword art and choose to become immortal here. The green-robed old man smiled. Senior, you must be the mortal who taught the Love Destroyer sword art to Xianjian Patriarch, right? Ning Chi smiled. Deep down, he was shocked. If what the old man said was true, then his every move over the years had been under the old man's nose. Yes. The old man smiled and nodded. That guy is not talented and couldn't learn it after so many years. I didn't expect you to get it first. Otherwise, you would be dead. After that, before Ning Chi could react, the old man waved his sleeve and 9 marks appeared on Ning Chi's body. One of them was the word Jiang. Ning Chi couldn't see the other 8. The atmosphere on the mountain peak suddenly became strange. Chapter 2554. A lackey of the Tiandao clan? Ning Chi looked at the green-robed old man quietly and didn't make any extra movements. Although he didn't know the old man's identity, he now knew that the old man's position should be against the Jiang family. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Ning Chi deeply understood this principle. However, the old man probably didn't know. Each of these 9 marks probably belongs to an extremely terrifying clan. The other 8 marks should be the same as the Jiang clan, the Tiandao clan that the old man mentioned. The word Tiandao is added in front of the clan, and the old man's emotion extinguishing sword art is the Dao extinguishing sword art. 1 sentence was enough for Ning Chi to know more than enough information. In the immortal world, apart from the Jiang clan of the Central Empire, there was no trace of the Jiang clan that Ning Chi knew of. There was no trace of these 9 clans on the Heavenly Dao list either, which was enough to confirm that their status was at least above the Langye Immortal Emperor. Ning Chi was very curious. What level was the old man who stood against such a transcendent force? Tai True Immortal? Immortal Duke? Immortal Emperor? Or even stronger? You're very calm. You've already seen these 9 marks, haven't you? The old man in green said with a smile. Yes. Ning Chi smiled and nodded. But I still don't know much about the Tiandao clan that you speak of. Can you tell me a thing or two? The green-robed old man looked at the sky with a smile that was not a smile. Then, He glanced at Ningqi and said indifferently, "There are some old farts in the Tiandao clan who love to play tricks. In this world, there are countless existences like you. You are not the only one, and you will definitely not be the last. If you want to know about if you want to know about these 9 great clans, someone will naturally tell you when you're qualified to know." Pausing for a while, he continued, "Your cultivation is too low. Among the candidates they chose, you are not eye-catching. Today, I came to find you because you have comprehended my emotion destroyer sword art. In this way, you can be regarded as my successor. However, I hate your identity. So, after a period of time, you should leave the ancestral land. I'm afraid I won't be able to control myself and will kill you." "Leave the ancestral planet? Is he chasing me away?" However, this might be the gentleness of the old man. Ningqi wasn't stupid enough to retort. "Senior, after some time, how long is that? 3 to 5 years? 30 to 50 years? Do as you see fit." The green-robed old man smiled. "If that's the case, thank you for showing mercy, Senior." Ningqi smiled and cupped his hands, then turned around and went down the mountain. Meanwhile, in a galaxy far away from the ancestral star, a faint voice resounded across the universe. "An outer disciple has been taught the emotion destroyer sword style. Mark him heavily, and if he meets the requirements, he will be accepted into the Jiang family as a disciple." "Ancestor, do you want me to observe it personally?" "There's no need. Keep a close eye on the others. Compared to them, this child is still slightly inferior." "Yes." There was a moment of silence. Another voice echoed in the desolate stars. "Patriarch, it has been so many years and that person must have perished beneath the heavenly Tao. Why don't we go and retrieve that fellow's head from the homeworld? Neither you nor I know if he can swing the 6th sword strike. Do you still want to go?" This, after Ningqi left, the corners of the green-robed old man's mouth curled up slightly. He glanced at the sky again, and his eyes revealed a trace of mockery. Coward, then, there was a trace of sadness on his face. "Ancient immortal incense body-tempering art, ancient immortal godly ring, Tiandao clan. Masteress, I don't really understand your moves in this life. Bluestone Town." When Ningqi returned, Ingzhen Xuan and Li Xian had been waiting for a long time. Seeing that Ningqi was safe and sound, the 2 girls heaved a long sigh of relief. "That old man is not simple." Li Xian looked at Ningqi and transmitted her voice. "He might be an ally." Ningqi smiled. "Ally?" A trace of shock flashed across Li Xian's eyes. Could that old man be an ancient immortal as well? Apart from her and Ningqi, there was a 3rd ancient immortal on the ancestral star? Li Xian was not in the ancestral star on the day that Jiang Feng was killed, and Bai Shengshuan never told her about it. Otherwise, with Li Xian's intelligence, she would have known that the 2 old men were the same person. It's just a possibility. His cultivation level is much higher than ours, so we don't have to pay too much attention to him. Ningqi transmitted his voice. "Does your sworn sister know about these things?" Li Xian suddenly asked. Ningqi glanced at Ingzhen Xuan and smiled. "She doesn't know. It's not good for her to know too much." Fog? The people of Bluestone Town suddenly noticed that there was an additional layer of fog on the streets and alleys. While they were shocked, they were also a little flustered. "The 2nd divine tomb is about to open." Li Si and the rest walked out of the yard with solemn expressions. The immortals in Bluestone Town all noticed this, and they were excited and expectant. They had waited here for so many years, and Ji Wulyo did not disappoint them. The 2nd divine tomb began in Bluestone Town. In Liang City, a group of figures rose into the air and rushed towards Bluestone Town. Ji Wulua's expression was a little strange. According to his calculations, the tomb of the god of sin should have appeared in Liang City, but now there was a deviation and it actually appeared in Bluestone Town. There was a boy in Bluestone Town that even he could not see through. Could it be that the boy's calculation skill was better than his? 10 minutes later. The people of Bluestone Town were safely sent to Liang City by Ning Qi. Uncle Qi, can we still go back to Bluestone Town? Chen Huan was a little worried. He would not be able to fulfill his father's dying wish if Bluestone Town was gone. Of course, but it will take some time. You should stay in Liang City in the meantime. Ning Qi comforted Chen Huan, and with a single move, he rose into the air and returned to Bluestone Town. At the moment, Bluestone Town was completely shrouded in fog, and the situation inside could not be seen clearly. Outside Bluestone Town was filled with prodigies brought by various Grand Luo, and there were roughly 50 of them. Around 10,000. Among them, only 30% were immortals native to the homeworld, while the other 70% were from outside. Some of the Grand Luo could not wait any longer, and had sent their prodigies to try and see what level of immortals were allowed to enter the Divine Tomb. Ji Wuliu frowned and said loudly, "The Divine Tomb is not fully open yet. It would be dangerous to enter now." Many people paused for a moment. Some believed in Ji Wuliu, but some didn't. They thought that if they entered first, they might get a great opportunity. So they flashed into the fog and disappeared. No one knew whether they were in danger or had really entered the tomb of the god of sin, but they were sure. This time, both heavenly immortals and golden immortals could enter the divine tomb. Because of Ning Qi, those from the Jade Clear sect and the Mystic Sword sect stood together. Human immortals, earth immortals, heavenly immortals, golden immortals, all can enter? Qi Yao looked at Old Man Mystic Sword thoughtfully. Let's wait. Ji Wuliu's words make some sense. Old Man Mystic Sword smiled. Chapter 2555. The mist grew thicker and thicker until finally, there were even traces of golden light that seemed to be swimming dragons within the mist. When the Grand Luo present saw that, they knew that the divine mausoleum was fully opened. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. One figure after another streaked through the air and into the mist. At this moment, every second was of utmost importance. Nobody knew if there would be a great opportunity waiting for them within the divine mausoleum when it was first opened. Only by seizing the initiative would there be a chance of seizing the opportunity. I wonder if we Grand Luo can enter? A Grand Luo from the outside world suddenly asked. We'll know once we try. Li Si had long since been itching to enter the divine mausoleum. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3 breaths. Seeing that Li Si was not obstructed by the mist, the Grand Luo present finally understood why the exotic mystic sect would send Ji Wuliu this time. They believed that the exotic mystic sect had long since predicted that the second divine mausoleum would be opened. Grand Luo could enter the divine mausoleum. Let's go. One by one, the Grand Luo flew into the mist. This time, they could finally seize the opportunity with their own hands and did not have to pin their hopes on the disciples of their sections. There was a ripple of anticipation and excitement in their hearts, for it was extremely difficult to take a step further at the Grand Luo level. However, the divine mausoleum before them might have the opportunity they wanted. Ji Shan entered. The Grand Luo prodigies all entered the mist almost at the same time, followed closely by the Grand Luo of the 10 prefectures and the Grand Luo from the outside world. Elder. The exotic mystic sect prodigy looked at Ji Wuliu. Let's go. Ji Wuliu glanced at Ning Qi, smiled, and led the exotic mystic sect disciples into the mist. Junior sister, shall we go together? Bai Shengxue looked at Li Xian. Second senior brother, let's go in first. Li Xian smiled. All right. Bai Shengxue snorted inwardly, but maintained his smile on the surface and nodded with great grace, before flashing into the mist. Let's go too, mysterious sword. Qi Yao said. The divine mausoleum this time won't be simple. At the very least, the danger inside is much greater than the first one. Even you and I, as Grand Luo, could fall. Old Man Mysterious Sword said indifferently. If you want a fortuitous encounter, you naturally have to face danger. I understand that. If you don't want to go, I'll go alone. Qi Yao frowned. Who said I'm not going? The corners of Old Man Mysterious Sword's mouth curled up slightly as he glanced at Ning Qi. Brat Ning, if I can't leave this divine tomb, you'll be the one to take the position of sect master of the Mysterious Sword sect. Old Man Mysterious Sword's words were not hidden from the crowd, so when the disciples of the Xianjian sect heard those words, they immediately sucked in a breath of cold air and looked at Old Man Mysterious Sword and Ning Qi in disbelief. At the same time, they were less excited and more frightened. Even the old ancestor felt that the tomb of the god of sin was very dangerous this time. If they entered it with low cultivation, wouldn't they die? Damn it, Master actually wants him to be the sect leader. Shi Yifan's heart was in turmoil, but he did not show any unusual expression on his face. Ning Qi was not the same as before. He could even kill a grand luo like White Bones with a single slash. He would not dare to provoke Ning Qi even if he was given 100 guts. Nailan Shiji, He Zhe, Li Zhangtong, and the others had similar thoughts as Shi Yifan. However, among them, there were a few who felt an inexplicable sense of anticipation toward Old Man Mysterious Sword's arrangements. If Ning Qi were to take the position of sect master of the Xianjian sect, would he lead the Xianjian sect out of the ancestral planet and become a more powerful sect? An even more powerful sect, such as the Jiang family of the Central Empire? Or the upper sect of the Xianjian sect, the Ascension sect? Long live the old ancestor. It's best if you don't say such inauspicious words. Ning Qi smiled and then walked into the fog. His pace was slow, neither too fast nor too slow, which formed a sharp contrast with the figures beside him that were rushing away. Ing Zhenxuan, Li Xian, and the others followed behind Ning Qi and entered the mist at the same time. You guys go in first. Qi Yao waved his hand. The prodigies of the Ascension sect and Xianjian sect were already impatient and rushed into the mist. Soon, other than Qi Yao and Old Man Mysterious Sword, there were no other immortals outside Bluestone Town. However, there were many mortals hiding in the distance, peeking their heads out to look. Their eyes were filled with excitement, greed, fear, and hesitation. Mysterious Sword, what did you calculate? Qi Yao looked at Old Man Mysterious Sword with a serious expression. I didn't calculate anything. Old Man Mysterious Sword shook his head. Impossible. Given your temperament, why would you say something like that if you didn't calculate anything? It's like you're leaving behind your last words. Qi Yao frowned. I can calculate the heavens, earth, humans, immortals, and demons, but I can't calculate myself. Old Man Mysterious Sword smiled and walked into the mist. Qi Yao immediately followed after him. However, he still had an indescribable feeling in his heart. He had a feeling that something bad would happen when the god's tomb opened. The immortals had all entered the mist, and many mortals who were hiding in the distance began to approach Bluestone Town tentatively. Suddenly, a young man rushed into the mist and disappeared from everyone's sight. When the rest of the mortals saw this, they gritted their teeth and entered the mist, regardless of whether they were old or young, women or children. They knew that the immortals of Bluestone Town and Liang City had been waiting for this place for decades. There were things that even the immortals desired in this place. To them, it was even more precious. How could they let go of such an opportunity to approach the path of immortality? Just like last time, after entering the mist, Ning Qi was separated from Li Xian and Ing Zhenxuan. However, this time around, the god's tomb resembled a palace buried deep underground. The long, pitch-black corridor was illuminated by oil lamps that were 150 meters long. Looking into the distance, the oil lamps were like specks of starlight that adorned the long corridor. There seemed to be no end to the corridor. Ning Qi walked to an oil lamp and reached out his hand. A spark flew out from the oil lamp and landed on Ning Qi's palm. Even with Ning Qi's perfected Skyfiend corporeal body cultivation, he was unable to completely defend against the spark. It burned a scar on his palm. Great Tao Fire. The owner of this god's tomb is not simple, perhaps the immortal slaying gourd is really inside? Ning Qi smiled slightly and took a step back, distancing himself from the oil lamp. A hint of fear flashed in the depths of his eyes. The flames on the oil lamp were not ordinary flames, but flames of the Great Path formed by the power of the Great Path. Its power was no less than that of an ordinary mid-grade Tao item. Yet, it was only used to decorate the corridor. The owner of the tomb must have had a very high cultivation when he was alive. Senior Brother Ning? A surprised voice came from behind. Chapter 2556. What? Am I that frightening? Ning Qi said with a faint smile. Of course not. Li Zhangtong forced himself to calm down and said with a forced smile, We just didn't expect to meet Senior Brother Ning so soon. The three of us are a little surprised. This place is full of danger. You three should be careful. Ning Qi smiled. Then, he ignored the three of them and walked away. Should we follow him or not? Yang Xiaolong looked at Yan Feiwu and Li Zhangtong. Let's follow him. Senior Brother Ning is so powerful that he can kill a Grand Luo with a single slash. It's much safer to follow him, Yan Feiwu said. Li Zhangtong's eyes flashed with a hint of hesitation before he nodded. Follow. The three of them immediately chased after Ning Qi. After following him tentatively for a while, they breathed sighs of relief when they saw that Ning Qi didn't chase them away. However, they didn't dare to get too close to Ning Qi. In their eyes, Ning Qi might be a celestial immortal, but in reality, he was equivalent to Patriarch Origin Firmament. I don't know what to do with the advancement mission this time. Ning Qi did not have time to pay attention to the three as he muttered to himself. On the day Chen Asen died, Ning Qi had already recovered his cultivation base and broken through several bottlenecks. Be it immortal cultivation base or demonic cultivation base, he had reached the great perfection stage. Celestial immortal perfection. Heavenly demon perfection. If he didn't use the emotion-extinguishing sword art, Ning Qi's current combat strength could even put up a fight against a perfected golden immortal. If he used the emotion-extinguishing sword art, Ning Qi felt that he could even kill Bai Xingxue, Li Si, Jishan, and even Jiang Wei, who was shot to death by the immortal extermination bow. The sword could cut through all things. The first move of the Love Destroyer sword art could slay a Zenith Heaven. Whether it was an early-stage Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal or a perfected Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal, regardless of whether they had condensed 3 to 5 Tao fruits or 33 Tao fruits, the Love Destroyer sword art treated everyone equally. However, Ning Qi still had no clue about the second move of the Love Destroyer sword art. He might comprehend it tomorrow, or he might not even be able to in a million years. Therefore, he could not put all his eggs in one basket. Although the Love Destroyer sword art was powerful, his cultivation base still had to be improved. When he reached the heavenly immortal perfection, the system had already issued an advancement mission. The mission was completed if he found the demon ancestor's heart. Heart of the demon ancestor? Ning Qi had never heard of such a thing, but from the words on the surface, it was definitely related to the demon race. He thought about posting a post on the forum and asking those capable people. However, the demon race was the same as the ancient immortal race. They were too sensitive in the immortal world, and posting a post could easily cause a stir. If the attention of others attracted the attention of the Tiandao clan, then Ning Qi's emotionless sword art would be useless. After all, he was still no match for a profound immortal. It only gave me a mission, but it didn't give me any clues. Luckily, there is no time limit. Ning Qi thought to himself. If it was before he became immortal, he might be a little anxious. However, after he became immortal and comprehended the first move of the Love Destroyer swordsmanship, Ning Qi was no longer very anxious to break through to the golden immortal realm. Since the system had given him such a mission, he could probably find some clues in the future. Because as long as the demon ancestor's heart existed, it was impossible for it to be completely untraceable. Just how long is this corridor? If we continue walking like this, how many years and months will it take? 1 month passed, and Yang Xiaolong's eyes revealed a trace of anxiety. The long corridor was the same as before, with no end in sight. Maybe we should speed up? Yan Feiwu looked at Li Zhangtong. No, senior brother Ning said that this place is full of danger. If we go forward rashly, we can easily die here. You and I are only at the Earth Immortal Great Circle. The master of this god's tomb might be stronger than the master of the first god's tomb. If 1 or 2 existences like the black-armored warriors appear, will we be able to escape? Li Zhangtong shook his head. Yan Feiwu and Yang Xiaolong felt that it made sense. Compared to opportunities, their lives were more important. It was better not to rush forward rashly. A day later, the 3 followed behind Ning Qi as usual. Suddenly, there was a commotion in front of them. The 3 were shocked. This time, hundreds of thousands of immortals entered, but after such a long time, they had not met a 4th person other than the black-armored warrior and Ning Qi. They had already guessed that this god's tomb might be very large. The commotion in front of them should be made by other immortals who had entered this place. Ning Qi's footsteps paused slightly, and he stopped on the spot. Li Zhangtong and the other 2 subconsciously moved closer to Ning Qi, and looked ahead with solemn expressions. The commotion was getting closer and closer, and they saw more than a dozen figures rushing over. After a few breaths, they saw Ning Qi, Li Zhangtong and the others. This was a group of heaven's prides with the cultivation of heaven immortals. However, this group of prides did not recognize Ning Qi. On the day White Bones died, they were all in Liang City, and did not follow their patriarch to Bluestone Town. Moreover, they came from the outside world, so they only knew Ning Qi's name, but did not know his appearance. When they saw Ning Qi and the other 3, they looked at each other. Suddenly, one of them reached out to grab Ning Qi, while the others grabbed Li Zhangtong and the others. "What are you doing?" Li Zhangtong and the other 2 shouted in shock and anger. They wanted to resist, but the opponents were all heaven immortals, and with their cultivation, they could not resist at all. "What is that?" Yang Xiaolong knew why this group of people wanted to escape. Behind them, there was a black shadow walking slowly towards them. This black shadow did not look like a living person, but like a puppet refined by some kind of puppet technique. It exuded an extremely terrifying aura, and its gem-like eyes were flashing with a faint red light. Then, Li Zhangtong and the other 2 were flung towards the puppet. Like them, Ning Qi was also flung towards the puppet by the heaven immortal. Including these 4, there are 10 of us. This puppet will leave after killing 10 people. We are truly lucky to meet 4 ancestral star natives here. After doing all that, the group of heavenly immortals relaxed. One of them even had a faint smile on his face as he spoke. Hearing this, Li Zhangtong and the other 2 finally understood that the puppet in front of them should be a product of this tomb of the god of sin. Moreover, it would leave after killing 10 people. They were now used as bait to feed this puppet. The puppet's neck twitched slightly, and it turned to look at the 4 figures flying towards it, then reached out a palm. Then, Chapter 2557. Say, Senior, what happened just now was a misunderstanding. The celestial immortal who grabbed Ning Qi and threw him to the puppet hurriedly laughed. What a joke! To dismember a puppet with the power of a golden immortal in the blink of an eye, what kind of means was required to do that? They already knew that they had kicked an iron plate. Li Zhangtong and the other 2 looked at the group of celestial immortals with slight mockery. Based on their understanding of Ning Qi, these celestial immortals would not live for more than 10 minutes. But then, they still felt a lingering fear. If they had advanced rashly, it was very likely that they would have met these celestial immortals even sooner and died under the puppet's hands. This time, they had survived thanks to them following behind Ningqi. Ningqi lowered his head and fiddled with it for a while. There was some kind of formation on this puppet, and the craftsmanship was very exquisite. The materials used were not ordinary materials for refining immortal artifacts, but more like materials for refining Tao artifacts. However, this puppet was not a Tao artifact, because it did not have the aura of the great Tao. At this moment, this puppet could not be more dead. Ningqi no longer paid attention to it, but turned his gaze to the group of celestial immortals. Misunderstanding? Ningqi smiled. Senior, we acted rashly and offended you. Please, for the sake of my master, forgive us this once. The celestial immortals smiled embarrassedly. What is your master's name? Ningqi asked as he walked towards the group of celestial immortals. My master's name is Puff. Before he could finish, the celestial immortal looked at Ningqi in shock, and then his corpse fell to the side, dead. When the rest of the celestial immortals saw this, they did not dare to stay where they were. They turned and fled, but as soon as they turned, they felt a cold sensation on their neck. Before they could react, their heads were separated from their bodies and fell to the ground. This time, Li Zhangtong and the other two watched Ningqi fight at close range. The more they watched, the faster their hearts beat. It was too terrifying. Just a few ordinary swords had killed more than 10 celestial immortals. If Ningqi attacked them, they would not even have time to react. Compared to when Ningqi had just arrived at the missing moon peak, he was unbelievably strong. A trace of regret flashed in Li Zhangtong's eyes. If he had known this, he would not have been tempted by Hizhe to secretly drag Ningqi down. There was no such thing as an impenetrable wall in the world. One day this matter would be exposed. At that time, the benefit that these heavenly immortals brought Ningqi was a dozen or so merit points. Adding the merit points he got from killing Jiang Wei and destroying White Bone Sect, Ningqi now had more than 400 merit points. However, this amount of merit points was still not enough to exchange for anything good. Senior brother Ning. Li Zhangtong suddenly stepped forward and cupped his hands. What's up? Ningqi said lightly. Senior apprentice brother Ning, do you remember the mission that was issued in the academy? A hint of hesitation flashed across Li Zhangtong's eyes before he clenched his teeth and said. Hearing this, Yan Feiwu and Yang Xiaolong jumped in fright, looking at Li Zhangtong in disbelief. Could it be that she wants to? I remember. I issued a mission to purchase the ancient demon poison, but the disciples in the sect raised the price, so I withdrew the mission. Ningqi looked at Li Zhangtong with a faint smile. That incident was actually instigated by senior brother Hizhe. We all had a hand in it. After saying this, Li Zhangtong let out a long sigh of relief. The pressure that had been lingering in her heart immediately dissipated. Yan Feiwu and Yang Xiaolong's faces turned pale. They could not help but tremble. In their hearts, they blamed Li Zhangtong for disregarding their lives and telling Ningqi about the evil deeds that she had done behind their backs. Okay, I got it. Ningqi nodded with a smile and continued to walk deeper into the corridor. Li Zhangtong was slightly startled. Seeing that Ningqi had no intention of teaching her a lesson, her eyes suddenly flashed with joy and she quickly followed. This, Yan Feiwu and Yang Xiaolong looked at each other in confusion. Ningqi was letting them go just like that? Seeing that Ningqi and Li Zhangtong had gone far, the two hurriedly followed. Like Li Zhangtong, they were somewhat happy. Since Ningqi did not teach them a lesson on the spot, it was obvious that he did not take the matter to heart. Or perhaps, he did not want to do anything to them. Regardless, at least they did not have to worry about Ningqi finding out about the matter. As for what would happen to Hizhe who instigated them, they did not care at all. A few more days passed. Li Zhangtong and the others finally saw the end of the corridor. It was a bronze door, and the corridor had become much wider. Hundreds of immortals with different auras were gathered in front of the bronze door. Among them was an old man who emanated the aura of a grand luo. He was currently sitting on the back of a giant tortoise with a thoughtful look on his face. The immortals nearby, regardless of which sect they hailed from, were all very respectful toward the grand luo. They did not dare to get too close to the bronze door, and instead left the grand luo alone to ponder in front of it. That's Ning Beixian? Many people noticed the arrival of Ning Qi and his crew. Among them, some had seen Ning Qi before, thus they immediately recognized him after seeing him. Their expressions became extremely interesting, as many of them were geniuses from the Yingzhou continent. Seeing Ning Qi walking toward the bronze door, the crowd automatically made a path for him. Gazes of respect, admiration, fear fell upon Ning Qi. Just as Ning Qi approached the bronze doors, the Grand Luo frowned and turned to look at Ning Qi, finding him rather familiar. However, even if a mere full-fledged heavenly immortal gave him a familiar feeling, there was no way he was someone from his circle. Therefore, the Grand Luo frowned and barked at Ning Qi, "Stand back! Don't disturb my thoughts." Is that tortoise-riding Grand Luo tired of living? His aura doesn't seem much stronger than White Bones, and yet he dares to speak to Ning Beixian like that. He must have just arrived at the homeworld? Many of the golden immortals present had weird looks on their faces. That was when one of the golden immortals who wanted to curry favor with the Grand Luo could not help transmitting, "Senior, he's Ning Beixian, the one who killed the prodigy of the Jiang family." The one who transmitted thought that the old man would know of Jiang Wei's reputation. Moreover, Jiang Wei was stronger than White Bones, so he naturally used him as an example. Ning Beixian? The old man did a double take. No wonder he found the name familiar. He had seen the live stream when Jiang Wei was killed. "Oh, so you're Ning Beixian. My apologies." Chapter 2558. You're too kind, Senior. How should I address you? Ning Qi did not seem to be angry at the old man's impoliteness. Instead, he smiled pleasantly. "South Sea Turtle Riding Old Man." The old man smiled and said his name. What a coincidence! Ning Qi first met the servant of the profound Azure Mansion, then the old man. Both of them were big haters in the posts he posted, and now he met them in real life. The former was fine since Ning Qi was not interested in the profound Azure Mansion, and he was the one who scolded Li Si first. As for the latter, it's Senior Turtle Riding Old Man. My apologies. Ning Qi cupped his hands and smiled. The immortals nearby looked a little strange. Why did he call him Senior Turtle Riding Old Man instead of South Sea Senior? Turtle Riding Old Man. That's a little indecent. The tortoise-riding old man frowned, but when he was certain that Ning Qi was not teasing him at all, a hint of displeasure flashed through his eyes, and he smiled insincerely. "Young brother Ning, you've already killed a Grand Luo at such a young age. Such a feat is enough to stand proudly even in the vast immortal realm. However, if we show off our abilities and stand out from the crowd, we will easily attract disaster." Killed a Grand Luo? Weren't there two? Only then did everyone realize that this Grand Luo probably did not know that White Bones was stabbed to death by Ning Qi. Senior Turtle Riding Old Man worries too much. Ning Qi smiled. "I hope I'm just worrying too much." The South Sea Turtle Riding Old Man smiled. A hint of imperceptible greed flashed in the depths of his eyes. Many people in the All Heavens Forum were discussing the Bao Ning Qi used to kill Jiang Wei, and the final conclusion was that it was probably an upper-grade Dao artifact. Not long after he arrived at the Ancestral Star, not only did he enter the second Divine Tomb, but he was also lucky enough to meet Ning Qi. How could he let go of such an opportunity? If he could get his hands on that Bao, his combat power would definitely increase by several levels. By then, he might even be able to fight against a profound immortal. If he had that Bao in his hand, I would definitely not be his opponent. However, although his cultivation is different from the rumors, he is already a peak heaven immortal. But if I attack from behind, he will definitely not be able to defend himself. By then, I'll interrogate him, and I believe he will definitely hand over the bow. Turtle Riding Senior, can't you open the bronze gate? Ningqi asked with a smile. The turtle riding old man's thoughts were immediately pulled back. He glanced at the bronze gate and suppressed the urge to attack. No one knew what was behind the bronze gate. Perhaps it was a fortuitous encounter, or perhaps it was a danger. No one knew how it would open or if it would open on its own. In such an environment filled with uncertainty, the old man did not plan on attacking Ningqi so early. In truth, he was rather wary of Ningqi aside from the entity behind the bronze door. His cultivation was worlds apart from Jiang Wei's, and if Jiang Wei was a prodigy amongst Grand Luo, he would be the bottom feeder amongst Grand Luo, perhaps even a little weaker than the Grand Luo of the homeworld. After cultivating for so many years, he had only condensed 2 Dao fruits, and it was only because he had obtained the All-Heaven Talisman by chance that he had condensed the second Dao fruit. Previously, he had only condensed 1 Dao fruit at the early stage of the perfected Golden Immortal Realm. There's a hidden mechanism in this bronze door. Do you have any idea what it is? The turtle-riding old man from the South Sea said with a smile. Senior, you're a Grand Luo. Can't you break it with brute force? Ningqi smiled. This place is filled with danger. If I were to use brute force and trigger a backlash, wouldn't I be reduced to ashes even if I'm a Grand Luo? The turtle-riding old man from the South Sea said with a smile that did not reach his eyes. While there was no ripple of mystic energy on the bronze door, who could guarantee that there was no special formation over it? One look was enough to tell that the divine mausoleum was no trifling matter, and the lord of the mausoleum must have been a great being when he was alive. With his ability, how difficult would it be for him to set up a formation that not even Grand Luo could see through? You're right, Senior. I've been thoughtless. Ningqi smiled lightheartedly. After all, this old fellow was not as brainless as those on the heavenly forum. The lord of the mausoleum has refined puppets to guard the door, and he must be fond of mechanisms. As the top prodigy of the homeworld who could slay even the Jiang family's Grand Luo, you must be intelligent. Why don't you give it a try and see if you could open this bronze door? The turtle-riding old man from the South Sea smiled. Ningqi's gaze fell upon the handle of the bronze door. His eyes twitched and he went up to pull the handle. Hee, young friend, do you think the lord of the mausoleum would let you open the bronze door so easily? There was a flash of mockery in the turtle-riding old man's eyes, but he was inwardly delighted. Ningqi did not appear to be very smart, suggesting that he could open the door with brute force, and now indulging in the wildest fantasies. Did he think that he could open the door just by pulling the handle? Still, the more foolish Ningqi was, the happier he was. Only a fool would do it. That was the experience of the turtle-riding old man over the years, and he had relied on it to forcefully ascend to Grand Luo despite many seniors of his sect looking down on him. The turtle-riding old man was not the only one who thought so. Everyone else seemed to share the same thought, and all of them appeared rather puzzled. The bronze door was clearly used to stop tomb raiders like them, so how could it be so easy? Creak! Ningqi reached out and pulled the handle, quietly opening the 8th of the 9 inner hidden gates. With a slight tug, the bronze door creaked as if it was decaying, and Ningqi slowly pulled it open. It opened? Everyone was left dumbfounded. How could it be so easy? The turtle-riding old man's face alternated between green and red, and then he used a smile to hide his embarrassment, laughing loudly. To think that the lord of the mausoleum would play a joke on us, haha. After a moment of surprise, everyone subconsciously took a few steps forward, wanting to see what was behind the bronze door. If it was still a long corridor, then they would be left in despair. It was a huge hall, an extremely large hall, and through the gap in the door, everyone could see that there were many similar bronze doors. With a cursory glance, there were no less than 1,000 of them, which was enough to prove that there were many more corridors like this one. The rest of the immortals might be behind those bronze doors. On the other side, there were a total of 9 bronze chairs in the center of the huge hall. There was no one on them, and they were placed in the center of the empty hall, exuding an eerie aura from head to toe. At that moment, the tortoise beneath the turtle-riding old man's feet suddenly moved, silently bringing him closer to Ning Qi. Close. Chapter 25:59. Oh, is that so? The turtle-riding old man's breathing was a little out of sorts. Just as he was about to attack Ning Qi coincidentally turned around, startling the cautious old man. A Grand Luo was startled by a full-fledged heavenly immortal, not to mention that Ning Qi had killed White Bones with a single strike. He would be laughed at if word got out. However, it was normal for the turtle-riding old man. He was just that timid. Ning Qi discreetly put some distance between himself and the old man. He did not want to stab the old man to death so soon, because he still had to confirm if this fellow was the one from the forums. Everyone walked into the hall. Apart from them, there was no one else in the hall. The rest of the people were most likely behind the bronze doors. These chairs seem very ordinary. There's nothing wrong with them. The turtle-riding old man frowned as he studied the 9 bronze chairs. They're just too ordinary. Even a single lamp in this divine tomb is the Tao fire. There must be a reason why the divine tomb's master placed these 9 bronze chairs here. Ning Qi smiled. Hee, that makes sense. The turtle-riding old man smiled. The others watched as Ning Qi and the turtle-riding old man conversed in front of the 9 bronze chairs, discussing the purpose of the chairs. While they had their own thoughts, they did not dare to voice them. After all, one of them was a Grand Luo, while the other was a monster who could easily slay a Grand Luo. Perhaps we'll know once we sit on it? The turtle-riding old man's eyes lit up as he swept his gaze at the immortals behind him. There were human immortals and golden immortals among them, and all of them felt a chill run down their spines. You, the turtle-riding old man picked 9 people. All of you, sit on it. As senior, one of the golden immortals laughed awkwardly. Why don't we wait for the other seniors to arrive before we decide? What a joke. How could they sit on the 9 bronze chairs when they knew that the divine tomb was filled with dangers? They might lose their lives if there was really something wrong with them. Oh? I'm a Grand Luo, but even my words don't work? The tortoise-riding old man from the South Sea smiled. Although his tone was very calm, the 9 people who had been chosen could sense a strong murderous intent in his words. Senior brother Ning, Li Zhangtong could not help but look at Ning Qi with a hint of pleading in her eyes. She was one of the people chosen by the turtle-riding old man of the South Sea. Senior, I'm from the high-clarity sect of the Juku Prefecture. There are Grand Luo in the sect as well. The gold immortal who spoke first smiled wryly. Opportunity waits for no one. If you don't get on it, I'll have to do it myself. The tortoise-riding old man from the South Sea revealed a sinister smile as the shadow of an immortal tree gradually appeared above his head. Its trunk was bare, with only a single Tao fruit hanging on it. Such a shabby scene still made these people feel pressured even though the strongest among them was only a gold immortal. The 9 people were still unwilling to sit on the bronze chairs. They all looked at Ning Qi. Right now, the only one who could plead for them was Ning Qi. Humph! You're courting death. The South Sea tortoise-riding old man sneered and immediately attacked. However, his target was not the 9 people, but Ning Qi, who was standing not far away from him. Seeing that Ning Qi did not move, the South Sea tortoise-riding old man smiled triumphantly. It was almost impossible for a Grand Luo to fail in ambushing a full-fledged heavenly immortal. It was a rare opportunity. The South Sea tortoise-riding old man felt that he might not be able to fight them for the immortal Slayer Bow if the other Grand Luo were present. After some hesitation, he felt that he could not delay any longer, and that he should act decisively. Immortal Qi imbued with the presence of the Tao swept towards Ning Qi like a tidal wave. But just as the South Sea tortoise-riding old man thought that he was about to succeed, a sword suddenly shot out of the wave. Seemingly unaffected by the surrounding immortal Qi, the sword smoothly fell into the South Sea tortoise-riding old man's hand. On his arm, splat, the immortal Qi vanished. An arm fell to the ground. The South Sea tortoise-riding old man gaped at his fallen arm, a hint of disbelief in his eyes. "Senior, you seem to have hit the wrong direction. They're over there." Ning Qi put Xiao He away and smiled. After chopping off the South Sea tortoise-riding old man's arm, Xiao He's presence skyrocketed. What was originally a broken inferior-grade immortal item had now become a better inferior-grade immortal item. Ning Qi's guess about Xiao He was becoming more and more accurate. It could indeed grow in battle, or perhaps recover. As for how much it could recover, Ning Qi did not know. Yes, I hit the wrong direction." The South Sea tortoise-riding old man recovered from his shock and nodded to admit that he had hit the wrong direction without batting an eyelid. Then, he picked up the arm from the ground and placed it on his shoulder, reattaching it in less than a breath's time. However, everyone could clearly sense that the arm's presence was much weaker than before. Forward! Beneath his calm face was a storm of shock. How is this possible? What kind of demonic technique is that? My immortal Qi is completely useless in front of it? Once one reached the Grand Luo realm and nurtured a Tao fruit, their immortal Qi would carry the presence of the Tao. While they would not be able to wield the power of the Tao as they pleased like profound immortals who had nurtured the power of the Tao, they would still be immeasurably stronger than beings below the Grand Luo realm. It was a qualitative change. And yet, he had suffered a setback in front of Ning Qi. Before this, he had always thought that Ning Qi had relied on the immortal slayer Bao to kill Jiang Wei. Now, however, he understood that Ning Qi was far from being that simple. "Senior, you don't look too well. Why don't you take a seat and rest for a while?" Ning Qi smiled. The South Sea tortoise-riding old man froze, then stared fixedly at Ning Qi. After a while, he sighed and muttered to himself, "I do need to rest." With that, he walked toward the 9 bronze chairs and hesitated for a moment before sitting down on one of them. "The 8 of you should take a seat as well." Chapter 2560. Well, why don't we wait for our patriarchs to arrive before making a decision? The 8 prodigies named by Ning Qi chuckled awkwardly. The sight of Ning Qi cutting down the tortoise-riding old man with a single swing of his sword had made them lose their confidence as prodigies. Still, for the sake of their lives, they wanted to try and see if they could buy some time. "Oh, so you won't have to sit on the chairs when your patriarchs arrive? That won't do, will it?" Ning Qi said with a faint smile. It was only then that the 8 realized that Ning Qi had a point. Even their patriarchs might not be a match for Ning Qi. Thinking of that, the 8 of them shyly walked to the bronze chairs and sat down. During this process, everyone's expressions were very solemn. They wanted to see what would happen next. In the end, the 9 bronze chairs were all occupied, but there was no change. "Little friend, it seems that your guess is also wrong. Perhaps these 9 bronze chairs were placed here for people to rest on." The tortoise-riding old man laughed awkwardly and rose. The other 8 promptly breathed a sigh of relief, feeling as if they had just escaped from a disaster. It was then that the other bronze doors opened one after another, with figures entering the hall. It appeared that they had also noticed that there were no seals on the bronze doors, and that they could open them as long as they had enough strength. It was as if the owner of the tomb was playing a joke on them. There were 1,000 bronze doors here, and behind each were dozens to hundreds of immortals. Almost 100,000 figures poured in at once, but the hall did not appear crowded at all. Ning Qi looked around and found several familiar faces, but familiar Grand Luo such as Li Xian, Ing Zhinshuan, Old Man Mystic Sword, Qi Yao, Patriarch Stone River, the 10 sovereigns, and Elder Pei were not among them. The number of people here was much fewer than those who entered. Perhaps there were several more halls like this? The 8 prodigies who were forced to sit on the bronze chairs by Ning Qi each sought out their own patriarchs and hid behind them, their lips moving as they clearly informed them of what had happened. The tortoise-riding old man breathed a sigh of relief at the sudden arrival of over 100 Grand Luo. He dared not stand too close to Ning Qi, and instead found a few familiar Grand Luo to stand with. There was still a hint of surprise and uncertainty in his eyes as he looked at Ning Qi. "He's here too." Li Si and Bai Xingxue exchanged glances. The two of them stood a short distance away from Ji Wuliu. Seeing that Ning Qi had already appeared in the large hall, they could not help but suspect that Ning Qi had already taken away some sort of opportunity. As for the other Grand Luo who had entered with them, none of them were present. "Ning Beixian arrived earlier than us." Apart from the 9 bronze chairs, there's nothing else in this huge hall. Could it be that a Dao artifact has already fallen into his hands? This time, the Grand Luo present looked at Ning Qi with complicated gazes. There was doubt and fear. They were all present on the day Ning Qi slew Whitebone, which was why even if they were doubtful, they would not say it right away and draw Ning Qi's hostility. Instead, they would wait for others to speak up. "Brother Ji, there are only these 9 bronze chairs here. Your Yi Xian sect is the most knowledgeable. I wonder why the owner of the tomb placed these 9 bronze chairs here?" An extremely tall, burly man with a hint of immortal beast aura spoke to Ji Wuliu. As he spoke, he glanced at Ning Qi with an inexplicable expression. Ning Qi took a look at the burly man's attributes and found that he was a middle-stage perfected golden immortal. Although he did not know how many Dao fruits he had, he was certain that he was not an immortal, but an immortal beast in human form. Immortal beasts had bloodline legacies and were born extremely powerful. Different species and bloodlines would result in different cultivations that could take human form. Some immortal beasts might not even be able to take human form even when they reach the level of primordial unity true immortal. Unlike demonic cultivators, the bloodline of demonic beasts was very ordinary. They were ordinary beasts that obtained opportunities and embarked on the path of cultivation, becoming known as demonic immortals. There were not many demonic immortals and immortal beasts on the homeworld, and most of them had yet to become Grand Luo. However, Ning Qi had heard that in places like the Langya mystic realm, the number of demonic immortals and immortal beasts was not much lower than that of immortals. Moreover, the two did not belong to the same faction and basically did not see eye to eye with each other. Hence, among the 100 or so Grand Luo present, only the burly man was an immortal beast, while the rest were ordinary immortals. This might be a formation. Ji Wuliu smiled faintly. A formation, huh? But they don't have the aura that a formation should have. The burly man frowned. Because it's not complete. Ji Wuliu walked up to the bronze chair and glanced at it, saying with some emotion, "The spirit materials used to build this chair have disappeared from the immortal realm for many years. I didn't expect to see them here. It's clear that the owner of this tomb lived for a very long time, and this homeworld is said to be the birthplace of immortals. There must be a reason for that." The eyes of the Grand Luo present lit up when he heard that. Since these spiritual materials had disappeared from the immortal realm for so many years, they must be extremely valuable items. If they were to take them away and smelt them into the original spiritual materials, they might be able to forge powerful sage items. However, the strong man's mind was not on the spiritual materials. Instead, he said thoughtfully, "Brother Ji, according to what you said, this formation is not complete. Presumably, there are other similar bronze chairs in other places in the tomb of the god of sin. Only with the addition of them can the formation be complete? If it's a formation, then is it a killing formation or a warp formation?" It must be a killing formation or a warp formation. Ji Wulyo smiled. If that's the case, we'll know once we test it. The burly man's eyes twitched. The Grand Luo present shared a glance, knowing what the burly man meant. As for those below Grand Luo, they were not worried at all since their patriarchs were beside them, but those without had a sour look on their faces. If they were going to test it, someone had to sit on it. And a candidate. It would probably have to be chosen from among them. Ji Wulyo himself had said that it could be a killing formation or a warp formation, and one could imagine how great the risk involved was. Well, we've tried it just now, but there was no reaction at all. The turtle-riding old man's eyes twitched, and he suddenly spoke. Have you? Ji Wulyo smiled. What's the harm in trying again? Chapter 2561. As soon as the burly man said this, everyone present felt some admiration. They knew that Ning Qi's methods were terrifying, but he had inexplicably stabbed White Bone to death with his sword. Back then, he had killed Jiang Wei, the genius of the Jiang family, with one arrow. Jiang Wei was someone who had condensed 20 fruits of the Wei. They still dared to provoke him? How iron-headed! Li Si by Xingxue, and the turtle-riding old man of the Southern Sea all revealed gloating expressions. Hee, including me, we are still short of 8 people. Why don't we go together? Ning Qi smiled and said. Tai Yuan looked at Ning Qi with a faint smile. Very well, having the number 1 prodigy of the ancestral star to risk his life with me, what an honor. After saying that, he actually walked towards the bronze chair and sat on it. Come on. Tai Yuan sneered at Ning Qi. Ning Qi's eyes moved slightly. He slowly walked to the bronze chair in the center and sat down. Seeing this, everyone had a strange expression. Then, they saw Ji Wulyo also walking towards the bronze chair. Something's wrong. Li Si and Bai Xingxue looked at each other. In the next moment, their figures moved slightly and each appeared in front of a bronze chair. In addition to Ning Qi, Tai Yuan, Ji Wuluo, Li Si, and Bai Xingxue, there were only 4 empty chairs left. Even the Grand Luo, who had been unwilling to risk their lives, had noticed that something was off. Logically speaking, would Ji Wulyo and the others be so self-aware as to sit on the chairs if there really was danger? That was when the tortoise-riding old man from the South Sea reacted, and snatched one of the bronze chairs. There were only 3 bronze chairs left, but there were still over 100 Grand Luo present. It seems that this bronze chair is the real key to entering the tomb of the god of sin. Perhaps we are only at the entrance. That's right. It's a pity we didn't notice it earlier. Still, with so many Grand Luo present, it wouldn't have been our turn even if we did. A trace of regret flashed in many people's eyes. However, they still had some doubts in their hearts. If the bronze chairs were really a teleportation array, why was there no movement even though 9 people had just sat on them? That senior from the Yixian sect said that this formation is incomplete. Perhaps we need 9 people to sit on the bronze chairs in other places at the same time. Only then can we activate this teleportation formation? Li Zhangtong's eyes moved slightly. She felt that her guess seemed to be quite reasonable. At this moment, the atmosphere in the hall was a little strange. There are still 3 bronze chairs left. How about this? This old man will take the risk and give it a try. A Grand Luo native to the homeworld chuckled, and walked straight towards the bronze chair. Ning Qi glanced at the Grand Luo's attributes and noticed that he was the patriarch of the Mountain Breaker sect. Hold on. Let me do this kind of dangerous work. You don't seem to be in good health. What if you encounter any danger? A slightly younger Grand Luo grinned as he stepped forward to stop the Mountain Destruction sect's elder ancestor and headed towards the bronze throne, only to be stopped by another. The situation was now in a stalemate. Out of the 100 or so Grand Luo, apart from the dozen or so who were extremely cautious, the rest were planning to fight for the remaining 3 seats. Still, they retained a shred of rationality in their hearts, and chose not to make a move. None of them was confident that they could remain unscathed in a battle between dozens of Grand Luo. Moreover, the juniors around them might be dragged into the fight as well. That was why they could only rely on their verbal cannons to persuade their opponents to give up their seat. Tai Yuan frowned slightly. Hurry up. Don't waste time. Ji Wulyo's smile remained on his face as if he was not in a hurry at all. Instead, he appeared to be very interested in the scene before him. Forget it. We'll just play rock paper scissors like mortals. Either way, both sides would suffer if we fight. Someone suggested. The suggestion was approved by the other Grand Luo. Soon, their juniors watched curiously as more than 80 Grand Luo rolled up their sleeves and played round after round of rock paper scissors like mortals. Eventually, 3 of them emerged victorious and claimed the remaining 3 seats, including the beaming Grand Luo. The middle-aged Grand Luo who had stopped him was defeated in the rock paper scissors game, and his expression did not look too good. Hold on. The other 8 seats are occupied by Grand Luo. Isn't it a little inappropriate to let a heavenly immortal take one of them? What if it affects the formation? The middle-aged Grand Luo who had been defeated suddenly spoke. While he did not mention Ning Qi's name, everyone present knew who he was referring to. After all, the only heavenly immortal sitting on the bronze chair was Ning Qi, and he was 2 ranks lower than the Grand Luo beside him. Not bad. Indeed, it might affect the balance of the formation. The other Grand Luo looked at each other and chimed in. They might not have dared to provoke a monster like Ning Qi if they were alone, but with so many Grand Luo joining forces, they did not believe that Ning Qi could beat them all. No matter how frightening Ning Qi's methods were, they believed that there must be a limit to them. In the end, Ning Qi's cultivation was still merely that of a Grand Luo. He was just a celestial immortal. Perhaps today was the perfect day to test Ning Qi, since there were not so many Grand Luo gathered at other times. Little friend Ning, why don't you come down and give up your seat, and arrange for the other 8 celestial immortals to sit with you? The middle-aged Grand Luo grinned at Ning Qi. What if I don't come down? Ning Qi laughed. The other Grand Luo chuckled and took a step forward, standing behind the middle-aged Grand Luo and looking at Ning Qi. Their intentions were clear. The middle-aged Grand Luo became even more confident and smiled at Ning Qi. Little friend Ning, we don't want to bully the weak like White Bone, but with so many seniors here, we won't be stabbed to death like White Bone. It would be heartbreaking if such a prodigy were to die here. I advise you to be obedient and give up your seat to us old folk. What do you say? You wait? No, killing you alone is enough. The corner of Ning Qi's lips curled up. The middle-aged Grand Luo felt a dangerous aura engulfing him at those words, and was left rather shocked. That fellow actually dared to attack so many Grand Luo? The tip of the sword poked out from the back of the middle-aged Grand Luo's head. He then slowly sheathed it. From the moment Ning Qi drew his sword to the moment he sheathed it, there was not a hint of smoke or fire at all, as if he had done something very ordinary. There was a glint of amusement in Ji Wulyo's eyes. He had already noticed the middle-aged Grand Luo's death qi when he spoke. Tai Yuan did not seem to feel anything from Ning Qi's sword, and maintained his cold smile. On the other hand, Li Si, Bai Xingxue, and the others were even more wary of Ning Qi. The most terrified of all was the old tortoise-riding man of the South Sea. He had thought that Ning Qi had cut off one of his arms because he could not kill him with a single stab, but now it seemed that Ning Qi had been merciful. Chapter 2562. Please take a step forward? The Grand Luo looked at each other. None of them stepped forward, and instead took a step back, with one of them smiling sheepishly. We won't stop you if you want to risk yourself, young Ning Qi. How terrifying! Killing a Grand Luo just like that? Many of them had only heard of Jiang Wei and White Bones, but they had never seen it with their own eyes. Now that they saw Ning Qi kill that Grand Luo with a single slash, they all gasped inwardly. There was a hint of admiration in their eyes as they looked at Ning Qi. Why? Because even Grand Luo would have a hard time killing one another. At that level, one's vitality was so frightening that they could at most escape to heal their wounds even if they were defeated for a moment. Ning Qi killing a Grand Luo so cleanly was several levels above ordinary Grand Luo. Otherwise, the Grand Luo present would not have been so cowardly. As long as they could hold Ning Qi back for a few breaths, they would have hundreds of ways to subjugate him. Most importantly, however, holding him back for a few breaths was too difficult. They would have to sacrifice a few lives, and who would do that? Ning Qi smiled. The Grand Luo present could see the disappointment in his eyes, and could not help but curse inwardly. Was this guy really a killer? After that, no one else dared to come out and speak blindly. Ning Qi and the other 9 sat on the bronze chairs for several hours. Just as the other Grand Luo thought that Ji Wulyo's guess was wrong, a faint green radiance suddenly shone from the bronze chairs. The faint light engulfed everyone on the bronze chairs, including Ning Qi. A hint of fear flashed through the eyes of the tortoise-riding old man, but he did not act recklessly. Since he had chosen to sit on the bronze chair, he had tied his life to Ji Wulyo and the others. He believed that even if he was not fated enough, following Ji Wulyo and the others would never go wrong. It's really a formation. I wonder if it's a teleportation formation. The expressions of the Grand Luo, Golden Immortals, and Heavenly Immortals present changed slightly. Some looked on enviously, while others looked solemn. With a flash of green radiance, the bronze chairs became empty in the blink of an eye. Ning Qi and the others had vanished without a trace. It really is a teleportation formation. The other Grand Luo looked at each other. Since they could not get the first batch, the second batch was extremely important. What do you think? Let's play rock, paper, scissors. As the rock, paper, scissors continued, batches after batches of Grand Luo boarded the warp portal. Soon, all of them had vanished from the hall. The Golden Immortals present breathed a sigh of relief when they saw that, anticipation showing in their eyes. They also used the rock, paper, scissors method to leave, including the Celestial Immortals. However, at the Earth Immortal level, the rock, paper, scissors method was no longer useful because there were too many Earth Immortals. If this continued, when would they be able to sit on the bronze throne? If the time dragged on for too long, the opportunities would have already been snatched away by others. Perhaps there would even be a joke that the tomb of the god of sin disappeared without them being able to sit on the bronze chair. Therefore, the hall instantly became a mess of fighting. Only the strongest would have the qualifications to sit on the bronze chair. Li Zhangtong and the other 2 didn't join the battle at first. They waited until the contestants they thought were stronger than them left before they started to fight for the bronze chairs. Not long after, the 3 of them successfully sat on the bronze chairs and disappeared from the hall. This is the ancestral planet? Ning Qi appeared on a familiar mountain range. There was no one around, but he could occasionally see immortals flying past in the sky, and there was no lack of profound immortals among them. That's right. In less than 10 minutes, Ning Qi had already seen 3 profound immortals flying over his head. Their divine senses were still on Ning Qi, but when they realized that Ning Qi was only a perfected celestial immortal, they ignored him. These 9 bronze chairs teleported me out of the god of sin's tomb? But why would there be so many profound immortals on the ancestral planet? And the mountain range I'm in, if I'm not mistaken. This is the main peak of the mystic sword sect, right? Ning Qi swept his gaze around and saw many familiar peaks, including the missing moon peak. He was sure that this was the mystic sword sect. However, this place was desolate and uninhabited. There were no buildings at all, and no traces of the mystic sword sect's existence could be seen. Illusion? A hint of suspicion flashed in Ning Qi's eyes. If it was an illusion, then the methods of the Lord of the God of Sin's tomb were too terrifying. He had never seen such a realistic illusion. This illusion simulated the mystic sword sect that Ningqi was most familiar with. Then, could it even simulate the entire Yingzhou? Perhaps the place where the others are is also the sects that they are familiar with? Or throwing everyone into the same illusion? If it's an illusion, then the aura of those profound immortals who passed by just now is too real, at the same time. Li Si by Xingxue, the Southern Sea Turtle Riding Old Man, Ji Wuliu, Tai Yuan, and the others who were sitting on the bronze chairs all appeared in different places. Everyone's expression was similar to Ning Qi's, as if they were all extremely shocked by the scene before them. An illusion, right? The Southern Sea Turtle Riding Old Man looked around. At this moment, a grand luo descended from the sky and landed in front of the Southern Sea Turtle Riding Old Man, and said coldly, "I have never seen you on the ancestral planet. Which sect or sect are you from? Are you a demon spy?" Demon spy? The Southern Sea Turtle Riding Old Man was stunned for a moment, and then became angry. "You want to deceive me with a mere illusion. Go to hell." He attacked without hesitation, wanting to break the illusion before him. "It really is a demon spy." The other party roared and struck out with his palm. The Southern Sea Turtle Riding Old Man and his tortoise were sent flying into the air and landed thousands of feet away, coughing out a mouthful of blood at the same time. How is this possible? There was a hint of fear in the Southern Sea Turtle Riding Old Man's eyes, and he turned to flee without hesitation. The illusion was too frightening, and he could feel that the injuries he suffered were incredibly real. He would probably die to the illusion if he did not flee. Demon spy, damn it! Could this be an illusion from the great war between immortals and demons? This period where even immortal emperors would die in battle is too terrifying. The Southern Sea Turtle Riding Old Man thought as he fled. The four legs of the tortoise beneath him moved wildly as if it was swimming, but its speed was extraordinarily quick, and it soon left the Grand Luo behind. Seeing that the other party did not give chase, the Southern Sea Turtle Riding Old Man breathed a long sigh of relief and put away the tortoise. Chapter 2563. Phew! Ningqi looked at the giant city in front of him and let out a long sigh. If not for his rationality telling him that everything before him couldn't be real, he would have thought that this was the ancestral planet of the past. The immortal qi around him was so dense that one breath was equivalent to the effect of cultivating on the peak for a month on the mystic sword sect master. Cultivating on the peak for a month would only take effect, and the place he was at was just an official road, not some special heavenly abode. Legend had it that the ancestral planet was the birthplace of all immortals. In the immortal realm, the first level 9 planet and the first immortal emperor came from the ancestral planet. What Ningqi saw now was somewhat similar to the legend. Just now, a 5-clawed golden dragon more terrifying than a mystic immortal had pulled a luxurious carriage and entered the Emperor-Ancestor city before Ningqi's eyes. Apart from the golden dragon, there were 3,000 young boys and girls following behind the carriage, each with an aura no weaker than Xian Jian, Qi Yao, and the other Grand Luo patriarchs. Among them were 99 golden-armored soldiers with auras comparable to the Jade Pure patriarchs. Ningqi couldn't guess who was inside the carriage, but he knew that a golden dragon that was suspected to be at the level of a primordial unity true immortal was pulling it. The carriage was accompanied by 99 mystic immortals and 3,000 Grand Luo immortals. The being inside must at least be an immortal lord, right? Ningqi was sure that the ancestral planet he was at previously could not have an immortal monarch, and there could not be this Emperor-Ancestor city before him. Ningqi had not stayed in Yingzhou for long and had never heard of this Emperor-Ancestor city, which was enough to prove that all of this was probably an illusion created by the Lord of the Divine Tomb. The carriage that just passed should be Zhuoqiu Immortal Monarch's carriage. Rumor has it that Xingong Immortal Monarch is marrying off his daughter this time, and immortal monarchs from all directions have come to congratulate him. Looks like the Emperor Ancestor City is going to be very lively from now on. It won't be long before all the rare geniuses show up. Not far away from Ning Qi stood a few young geniuses that were in high spirits. The clothes they wore were almost similar to Ning Qi, but there was a similarity between them, and it was that their clothes all had some simple embroidery on them. It was either embroidery of unusual beasts, mountain scenes, or seal characters. These young geniuses all possessed cultivations at the heavenly immortal realm, and their cultivations ranged from the initial stage to the perfection stage of the heavenly immortal realm. But they seemed to not mind the difference in cultivation realms between them, and they didn't differentiate between each other when they chatted together, and they seemed to be equal. In addition, there were people riding immortal beasts on this road from time to time, galloping towards the Emperor Ancestor City. There were many celestial immortals among these people. It could be seen that there were many more celestial immortals in the illusion than in Yingzhou. Not just heavenly immortals, but even golden immortals, grand heavenly immortals, and mystic immortals. Shingong, immortal monarch. Ning Qi's ears twitched. He was sure that he didn't hear wrongly. These 4 words left a deep impression on Ning Qi. Back in the central continent, when he was in a desperate situation of death, there was a guy who called himself Shingong Celestial Monarch who wanted to take over his body. In the end, he was scared witless by the brand of the Tiandao family. In the end, not only did he fail to possess Ning Qi, he even allowed Ning Qi to obtain many benefit. Place. Coincidence? Same name? Ning Qi did not believe it. Ordinary people might have the same name, but how could an immortal lord have it? What was the background of the master of the tomb of the god of sin? How could an existence like Shingong Celestial Monarch exist in an illusory realm constructed from his memories? If Shingong Celestial Monarch recognized the brand of the Tiandao family, did that not mean that Ning Qi might have the chance to obtain some information about the Tiandao family? Did that not mean that Ning Qi might have the chance to obtain information about the Tiandao family from this place? It really is a very long time ago. Not to mention Patriarch Xianjian, even my master might not have been born yet? Ning Qi sighed inwardly. Although he still believed that this place was an illusory realm, for some reason, there was a hint of anticipation in his heart. With that thought in mind, Ning Qi walked towards the young prodigies. As if noticing Ning Qi, they smiled and stopped talking, waiting for Ning Qi to speak. Brothers, I have just inadvertently learned that Shingong Celestial Monarch is marrying off his daughter. Is that true? Ning Qi said with a cupped fist and a smile. The trio looked at each other and then burst into laughter. One of the young prodigies looked at Ning Qi strangely and said with a faint smile, "Brother, the entire homeworld knows that Shingong Celestial Monarch is marrying off his daughter, but you don't know about it? May I ask, brother, did you come from the land of demons?" The land of demons, had illusions become so smart as well? Should he kill them? While Ning Qi was deep in thought, one of the trio laughed again. Brother Bai Di, don't joke around like this. While the demons have been defeated, there are still some survivors, and the higher-ups are keeping a close eye on them. If others heard it, wouldn't it bring trouble to this brother? Bai Di laughed and said to Ning Qi, "Brother, are you scared? Brother, you really like to joke. You really scared me just now." Ning Qi smiled. While he did not come from the land of demons, he was a genuine skyfiend. But as long as Ning Qi did not deliberately change into his demon form, no one would be able to tell. However, Ning Qi learned some more information from the other party's words. Had the demons been defeated? Was that the end of the great war between immortals and demons? At this time, did the ancient immortals already bear the infamy of betraying the immortals and leading demons into their territory? Moreover, this fellow's name was rather domineering. Bai Di? Then I'm really sorry. As an apology, I'll treat you to a drink when we arrive at Emperor Ancestor City. How should I address you, brother? Since you're here, you should be going to Emperor Ancestor City, right? Or are you just passing by? Bai Di laughed and threw out 3 questions in a row. I'm Ning Qi, and I'm indeed going to Emperor Ancestor City. Ning Qi smiled. So it's Brother Ning. I'm Bai Di, a disciple of the mystical sky sect. Bai Di smiled and cupped his hands. Brother Ning, I'm Mo Xie, a lone cultivator without a sect. Mo Xie grinned. He was the one who had just scolded Bai Di for scaring people. He looked rather warm-hearted. Hearing this, Ning Qi's smile rippled. There was no such coincidence in this world. Bai Di Mo Xie. Ning Qi had seen these 2 names on the Immortal Lord's list of the Heavenly Tao list. Then, who was the 3rd fellow who did not seem to like talking? Brother Ning, I'm Ji Fei, a disciple of the Yixian sect. Ji Fei had a faint smile on his face as he cupped his hands towards Ning Qi. He was indeed not a talkative person. After reporting his name, he followed Ning Qi, White Emperor, and Mo Xie towards Emperor Ancestor City. Along the way, he just smiled and listened to the 2 talk with Ning Qi. Chapter 2564. Emperor Ancestor City. When the 4 of them entered the city, there seemed to be a special talisman on both sides of the city gate that lit up slightly. At the same time, the immortal guarding the city scanned Ning Qi and the 3 of them with his divine sense. Seeing that there was nothing unusual, he allowed them to enter the city. Haha, with the demon detection formation personally set up by Shengong Immortal Lord, no matter how the demon clan disguises themselves, they won't be able to sneak into the city. Mo Xie laughed. Speaking of which, this trip to the Emperor Ancestor City is much more guarded than the last time. They actually sent a profound immortal senior to guard the city gate. Isn't it overkill? After entering the city, Emperor Bai turned around to take a look inside. Ning Qi couldn't help but nod. There was indeed a terrifying gaze that seemed to be able to see through people. It must be a profound immortal. Shengong Immortal Lord's daughter is marrying off. Such an important event naturally needs to be more guarded. Otherwise, if the demon clan sneaks in and causes trouble, wouldn't it be embarrassing? Mo Xie said with a smile. After a pause, his eyes revealed a trace of anticipation. I heard that Shengong Immortal Lord's daughter is the most beautiful in the world. Any man would be moved by her. I'm really looking forward to seeing her face on the day of the ceremony. Ning Qi couldn't imagine that this guy would be the number 1 on the Immortal Lord list in the future. Perhaps the illusion of the Lord of the Divine Tomb was a little biased? After all, this wasn't the real world. Lower your voice. The one who's marrying Shengong Immortal Lord's daughter is not someone easy to deal with. I heard that his background is extremely mysterious and he has peerless talent. At such a young age, he's already in the perfect Xian immortal realm. He's going to break through to the Tai True immortal realm soon. In the future, he'll at least be a powerhouse. If what you said is heard by him, don't tell anyone that you know us. Emperor Bai smiled. You're the most cowardly. Ji Fei, do some calculations. Did anyone hear what I just said? Mo Xie curled his lips in disdain. The other party's background is too powerful. I can't divine it. Ji Fei said with a serious face. Alright, I was just joking. I knew you couldn't divine it. Let's go, let's have a drink first. Mo Xie urged. Ning Qi felt that he might be able to learn more about this place by following the 3 of them. Naturally, he would not refuse. Bai Di and the other 2 found a restaurant with great familiarity. There were countless immortals drinking in the restaurant, ranging from human immortals to golden immortals. However, there were no grand heavenly immortals present. It was likely that the restaurant's grade was not high enough. Lu Yulo's red braised lion head is extremely delicious. It's a good dish to go with wine. Brother Ning, it's your first time coming to Emperor Ancestor City. You're in luck to meet the 3 of us. As soon as he found a seat, Emosia winked at Ningqi with a grin, looking like he was asking for credit. His current cultivation was not high. He was at the middle stage of Heaven Immortal, Emperor Bai was at the peak of Heaven Immortal, and Ji Fei was at the early stage of Heaven Immortal. Indeed, I'm in luck. Ningqi nodded with a smile. At the same time, he noticed that there were 4 Earth Immortals sitting at a table not too far away. Though they didn't recognize Ningqi, Ningqi was able to tell where they came from based on their elemental attribute. Those 4 were the descendants of the Shang-Qing sect. It was obvious. There was no Shang-Qing sect in this era, so it was obvious where they came from. Looks like it's not just one illusion for each person. Everyone who entered the divine tomb this time was thrown into the same illusion. Ningqi narrowed his eyes. Since he had already met his fellow countrymen here, the others might already be in Emperor Ancestor City, or they might have gone to other places in the Ancestral Star in search of opportunities. Soon, the dishes that Emosia ordered were delivered to the table, along with a jar of immortal wine. The wine in the immortal world was like poison to mortals. If they accidentally drank a drop, they would probably sleep until they died. But to Ningqi it was still acceptable. With the strength of his fleshly body, even if he drank a jug, he would at most be slightly tipsy. Seeing that Ningqi was enjoying the wine so much, Emosia and Emperor Bai became even more intimate with Ningqi. Even Ji Fei, who didn't like to talk, took a few sips. But his alcohol tolerance was very poor, and after a few sips, his face was already red, and his words were a little slurred. Brother Ning, to tell you the truth, when I first saw you, I did a divination and found that your birth chart is very strange, Ji Fei stammered. You're just making things up. Emperor Bai scolded with a smile and said to Ningqi, don't mind him, he's from the Yixian sect. When we first met, he told us that we would be fated to be immortal monarchs in the future, haha. That's funny. Is that so? Ningqi did not find it funny, but his heart became solemn. The illusion in front of him was getting more and more confusing. Was it because of his own thoughts that the illusion used his subconscious and caused Emperor Bai to say those words? Or was it because the Lord of the Divine Tomb had given Ji Fei to Emperor Bai and Emosia? He even knew about the fortune-telling? That's too unbelievable, right? After Ji Fei finished his sentence, he did not hold on to Ningqi anymore. Emosia forced him to drink a few more cups of wine, and he plopped down on the table. Useless. Emosia looked at Ji Fei in disgust, then raised his cup and smiled at Ningqi. Come, brother Ning, let's drink. Isn't this the poor brother Emosia? Why are you drinking here? Did you know that I'm here today, so you came to pay your respects? A disgusting voice was heard. Ningqi noticed that Emosia's expression changed slightly when he heard this voice, and Emperor Bai's face also showed a hint of seriousness. A white-clothed noble young master appeared to the side with 3 to 5 young geniuses. They were looking at Emosia with a mocking smile. The young man in white exuded a trace of golden immortal aura, and the 5 young talents around him were also golden immortals, but they were all early golden immortals, and only the young man in white was an intermediate golden immortal. Dong Kun, I'm drinking in Willow Jade Tower, what does it have to do with you? The playful smile on Emosia's face had disappeared, and was replaced with a cold face. Young Master Dong, Emosia drank too much, don't bother with him. Emosia, brother Ning, help Ji Fei, let's go. Emperor Bai smiled at Dong Kun, and gave Ningqi and Emosia a look. Chapter 2565. Climb outside the Jade Willow Building? To a celestial immortal, this was a very insulting remark. Usually, if there was a feud between 2 parties, they could kill or beat each other. But insulting, it meant that the enmity between the 2 parties had probably gone beyond the level of killing. The diners at the nearby tables could not help but look up at Emosia. When they saw Kun's appearance, they all revealed looks of pity and fear. That's the proud son of the Dong clan. I've heard that he's talented in cultivation, but has a very bad temper. Now that I've seen him, it seems that's true. The Dong clan, is it one of the 3 great clans of the Emperor Ancestor City? That's right. His clan master was born as a slave and followed Shungong Celestial Lord for many years. After he broke through to the primordial unity genuine immortal realm, he was conferred the title of Celestial King by Shungong Celestial Lord. He was given special permission to get rid of his slave status and founded the Dong clan today. The other 2 clans are slightly inferior to him. After all, the Dong clan's patriarch and Shungong Celestial Lord are related. Ordinary people are unable to match up to the Xian element. How did those fellows offend such a person? I'm afraid it won't end well today. Either you climb out of Willow Jade Building or you die here. I remember now. 30 years ago, a few experts from the Dong clan went to the Gathering Cave province. Afterwards, a sword sect that had existed for many years in the Gathering Cave province was annihilated. According to Dong Kuan, this person should be a survivor of that sword sect. Hiss. The sword master whose heads were piled up into a tower of human skulls? So it was done by the Dong clan? Not bad. Why aren't you talking? Are you going to climb or not? Dong Kuan looked at Emo Xie with a faint smile. Emo Xie stared at Dong Kuan coldly. Ji Fei was still drunk, lying on the table without moving. Emperor Bai's mind raced. He wanted to find a way to alleviate the situation. Based on his understanding of Emo Xie, he would rather die than allow others to humiliate him. I won't. The speaker was not Emo Xie, nor was it Bai Di, nor was it Ji Fei. Who are you? Dong Kuan looked at Ningqi, and a trace of coldness flashed in his eyes. What does my conversation with Emo Xie have to do with you? Are you prepared to die here if you want to interfere in the matter between us? Emo Xie was startled and looked at Ningqi with a trace of emotion in his eyes. He and Ningqi hadn't known each other for long, but Ningqi spoke up for him and stood on his side. Emo Xie naturally felt touched in his heart. However, after the feeling, Emo Xie didn't want to implicate Ningqi. He quickly transmitted a message. Brother Ning, don't worry about this matter. I came to Emperor Ancestor City this time for revenge. Ji Fei said that as long as I come to Emperor Ancestor City, Dong Kuan will die. Emperor Bai was slightly taken aback as well. Just as he was about to speak, Ningqi had already extended his hand to grab Dong Kuan. Ningqi's movement looked slow, but it was actually extremely fast. He grabbed Dong Kuan's neck and slammed him onto the table. Bang! The table shattered. Emo Xie subconsciously held on to Ji Fei and stood up with White Emperor in shock. As for Dong Kuan, he was lying in front of Ningqi in a daze. There was a red mark on his forehead. He didn't understand what had just happened. The surrounding diners stood in shock and looked at the scene in disbelief. Dong Kuan was an intermediate golden immortal. How could he be injured by a heaven immortal in the Great Perfection stage? Ningqi was still sitting on the chair, looking down at Dong Kuan who was lying on the broken table. He smiled and said, I'm drinking with someone. What are you doing here? Brother Dong. The few fellows that Dong Kuan brought with him finally reacted. Simultaneously they tried to suppress Ningqi, but all they saw was a flash of sword light. This group of early golden immortals froze on the spot. Then, their ears fell to the ground, dripping with blood. If you move again, it'll be your heads that fall next time, Ningqi said without turning his head. What kind of swordsmanship is that? Emo Xie and Emperor Bai were shocked. It was especially so for Emo Xie, who specialized in swordsmanship. His heart seemed to have been set off by a tempestuous storm. Ningqi's sword strike just now had given him too much shock. A perfected heaven immortal just used a sword strike to cut off the ears of a few early golden immortals? If he really wanted to kill, it wouldn't be the ears that were cut off. It would be the head, right? You deserve to die. Dong Kun finally realized the situation he was in. He roared in shame and anger. Just as he was about to get up, a foot landed on his body again. Bang! Dong Kun was lying on the ground again. Before he could move, Ning Qi bent down and grabbed Dong Kun's neck. He lifted him up and dropped him again and again, smashing Dong Kun to the ground again and again. Bang! 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 The entire Willow Jade restaurant shook violently as a result. The customers on the upper floors all ran down to see what was happening in front of them. Even the immortals on the nearby streets had gathered around, their faces aghast. They saw the proud son of the Dong clan being grabbed by a celestial immortal, and slammed into him again and again. His face was already covered in blood, and it was impossible to see his original appearance. Is that Dong Kun? Why is he in such a sorry state? Who attacked him? He, Immortal Lord Shengong, is marrying off his daughter. Too many geniuses came to Emperor Ancestor City. Many of them are stronger than Dong Kun. Did he offend someone he shouldn't have? To dare to attack the genius of Dong family in Emperor Ancestor City, the other party's background must be stronger than Dong family. Perhaps a disciple of an immortal lord. Out of the way. A group of cultivators in black armor came through the air. There were 9 of them in total. Each of them gave off the aura of a grand luo. They quickly entered Willow Jade restaurant and shouted when they saw Dong Kun being beaten up by Ning Qi. Stop! It's the Black Flag Troopers. White Emperor and Emosie's eyes flashed with fear. White Emperor immediately transmitted to Ning Qi, the Black Flag Troopers under Immortal Lord Shengong are here. Brother Ning, stop! Bang! With one last smash, Dong Kun fell to the ground like a pile of mud. He had already fainted. His friends saw the arrival of the Black Flag Troopers and hurried forward to accuse Ning Qi of his crimes. Ning Qi looked at the 9 people in black armor. His eyes moved slightly. What a familiar black armor. The black armor troopers he met in the first god's tomb wore the same armor. One of the Black Flag Troopers seemed to be the leader. After hearing their accusations, he looked at Ning Qi coldly. Immortal Lord Shengong's daughter is about to be married off. Yet, you started a fight in Emperor Ancestor City. What do you think your crime is? What crime is it? Is he allowed to hit me, but I'm not allowed to hit him? You guys are accusing me the moment you come. Are you all in cahoots? Ning Qi stood up and looked at them calmly. There was no trace of fear in his expression. Seeing this, they looked at each other. With such a performance, he was probably a genius with an extraordinary background. Looking at the unconscious Dong Kun, the possibility was even higher. Chapter 2566. Since you intend to stand up for him, then take him and scram. Asking about my background? Do you have the right? Ning Qi kicked Dong Kun's stomach. With a muffled groan, Dong Kun shifted several zhang on the ground and appeared in front of the 9 Black Banner soldiers. Good fella! This person doesn't even care about the Black Banner soldiers. Looks like his background must be very terrifying. Everyone says that Dong family is still Shengong, Immortal Lord's servant. Now it seems so. The Black Banner soldiers are Shengong, Immortal Lord's subordinates. They naturally protect Dong family. But now that they have kicked a metal plate, let's see how they deal with this. This is actually just a misunderstanding. It's just that young Master Dong wanted to spar with my brother. Now that he has lost, it's not a big deal. Black Banner soldiers, your duty is to defend against the demons, right? Why do you care about such a small matter? White Emperor suddenly smiled. Emperor Bai's words carried a hint of a reminder. He was reminding Yi Futian of his true duty, and not to bother with such a trivial matter. Hearing the commotion here, we naturally have to come and take a look. Since it's a misunderstanding, we will take our leave. The leader of the Black Banner soldiers glanced coldly at Ning Qi and turned to leave. Seeing this, Dong Kuen's friends immediately helped Dong Kuen up and quickly left Willow Jade Tower. Some were surprised that the Black Banner soldiers left so quickly, as if they had lost face. But thinking about it, if it was them, they would have done the same. Firstly, while Dong family had a close relationship with Shengong Immortal Lord, Dong Kuen was after all just a prodigy of Dong family. He didn't represent the entire Dong family. Offending an unknown prodigy who could easily suppress a golden immortal intermediate stage prodigy wasn't worth it. Secondly, Dong Kuen didn't die. His friend only lost an ear. Such injuries were all too common in fight. If they really wanted to take revenge, it would be Dong Kuen himself. The Black Banner soldiers had no obligation to do so. Thirdly, it was the problem of identity. While the Black Banner soldiers were directly under Shengong Immortal Lord, they weren't the most prominent among the factions under Shengong Immortal Lord. If they accidentally offended a disciple of an Immortal Lord, while nothing would happen to them, the Black Banner soldiers here would inevitably be worried. A fatal arrow shot from the dark. The annoying fly has left. Shall we find another place to continue drinking? Ning Qi looked at Bai Di and the other two. Ji Fei seemed to be gradually waking up and could stand on his own. He was looking at the scene in front of him with a confused look. Let's go. Emperor Bai nodded. When Dong Kuen came back to his senses, there would definitely be more problems. They couldn't stay in Luyulo for long. Emperor Ancestor City was very big, and the Dong family's influence couldn't cover the entire city. As long as they moved to a place where the Dong family didn't dare to mess around, they wouldn't be in too much danger. After all, if this matter were to spread out, it would definitely be regarded as a competition between geniuses. It was just that Dong Kuen, the genius of the Dong clan, had been defeated. If the Dong clan wanted to cause trouble, they would definitely send their own geniuses to challenge them. It was unlikely that they would directly send assassins to kill them. That would damage Shengong Immortal Master's reputation. Sometimes it was not always a good thing to be on good terms with Shengong Immortal Lord. In certain matters there would be too many scruples. After Ning Qi and the others left, several figures appeared near Luyulo. One of them looked at the backs of Ning Qi and the others as they left, then smiled at the four people around him and said, "There are 9 immortal monarchs in the ancestral star. I wonder which immortal monarch is this fellow a disciple of? Back then, we were still celestial immortals. Even if it's in the Great Circle, it wouldn't be able to suppress an intermediate golden immortal so easily, right? The immortal realm is vast, and there are all sorts of strange things. Who cares which immortal monarch he is from? Perhaps he just used some special method to hide his cultivation. But this time, immortal monarch Shengong's daughter's wedding must have attracted many geniuses. I heard that the one who is going to marry immortal monarch Shengong has brought an extremely valuable gift. He gave Shengong Immortal Lord a gourd, a supreme-grade Taoist artifact. My Taoist artifact is also a gourd. I wonder if I can see with my own eyes whether his gourd or mine is more powerful on the day of the grand ceremony." The one who spoke was a young man with a slightly red nose. He carried a huge gourd on his back, from which a faint wine fragrance wafted out. Apart from that, the gourd also carried a faint trace of the great Tao aura. It was extremely obscure, and if one didn't use their divine telekinesis, they wouldn't be able to discover it at all. The people around him immediately looked at the young man mockingly. "San Chi, your lousy gourd wants to stand shoulder to shoulder with a supreme-grade Taoist artifact? Although the wine it brews is excellent, are you going to feed the wine to your enemies in the future, and then kill them after they're drunk? Shoo shoo shoo. You don't understand my gourd." The young man called San Chi waved his hand and glanced at his friends in disdain. Luyulo was in the south of Emperor Ancestor City, but now Ning Qi and the others had arrived at a restaurant in the north of the city. This restaurant was much more luxurious than Luyulo, and they could occasionally see a few Xian immortals entering and leaving. Even Dong Kun wouldn't dare to mess around here. Emperor Bai smiled. Brothers, I was drunk just now, so I wasn't able to help. Please forgive me. Ji Fei cupped his hands in shame. Why are you saying that? But I. Emosier raised a cup of wine in his hand and faced Ning Qi. Thanks to Brother Ning for helping us this time. This cup of wine is for Brother Ning. Then, he drank it in one gulp, and his eyes were instantly filled with a layer of drunkenness. Brother Mo, you're too polite. Ning Qi smiled and drank a cup as well. Brother Ning, you beat Dong Kun so badly that he couldn't fight back. And that sword skill, I wonder which immortal lord's disciple Brother Ning is? Emperor Bai suddenly asked. What immortal lord's disciple? I'm the same as Emosia, I don't belong to any sect. Just now, that group of Black Flag soldiers clearly wanted to help Dong Kun. If I wasn't a little overbearing, how could I have gotten away? Ning Qi smiled. Don't belong to any sect? Emperor Bai and Emosia were slightly stunned. They didn't know if they should believe him or not. If he really didn't belong to any sect, then Ning Qi standing up for Emosia was even more precious. After 3 rounds of wine, Ning Qi didn't ask about the feud between Emosia and Dong Kun, and Emosia didn't seem to want to talk about it either. Everyone had a tacit understanding and stopped talking about Dong Kun. Ji Fei learned his lesson this time, and watched the 3 of them drink, maintaining his sobriety. He was a man of few words, but now he suddenly whispered. I heard that Shingong Immortal Lord's son-in-law is from the Heavenly Dao family that suppressed the ancient Immortal Clan and Demon Clan. Here it comes. Chapter 2567. Tiandao Family. Bai Di and Emosia were shocked. By Di's side, this war affected the entire immortal world. Because of the betrayal of the ancient Immortal Clan, we were almost wiped out. In the end, it was Tiandao family that turned things around and suppressed both the ancient Immortal Clan and the demon race. That's why we can sit here today. Let's drink. Emosia nodded with a solemn expression. That's right. Speaking of which, the Heavenly Dao Clan is the savior of all of us. Unfortunately, the existence of the Heavenly Dao Clan is too secretive. Up until now, I'm afraid that besides those immortal emperors, no one knows where their sect is. Otherwise, I would have gone to take them as my master. Hearing this, Ning Qi thought to himself that the Tiandao family's publicity skills were extremely good. Right now, all the immortals probably think that the ancient Immortal Clan had betrayed the immortals and that the immortal world was saved by the Tiandao family. In reality, according to the information Ning Qi had obtained over the years, it was clear that the ancient Immortal Clan had been deceived. They became little soldiers charging into the enemy lines. Just as they were about to achieve victory and drive out the demons, they were ambushed by the Tiandao clan. This ambush directly uprooted all the ancient immortals in the immortal world. If there were any survivors, they would be attacked by the other immortals and turned into street rats. Forget it. Rumor has it that Tiandao family is the existence closest to the Heavenly Dao. They can communicate with the Heavenly Dao. Why would such an existence like us? Bai Di shook his head with a smile, not having Emosia's strong desire to take him as a master. Brother Bai, Brother Mo, actually, both of you can become immortal monarchs in the future. Maybe you'll have a chance to join Tiandao family, Ji Fei said. You're still talking. Your divination skills aren't accurate at all. You said that I would be able to take my revenge once I reached Emperor Ancestral City. I almost died at Dong Kuen's hands. Immortal monarch. I would be satisfied if I could attain Dao fruit and become a Grand Luo. I don't even dare to think about abstruse immortal or Grand Unity true immortal. Immortal monarch. Emosier rolled his eyes at Ji Fei. Ji Fei smiled shyly. Maybe there's something wrong with my divination skills. After all, I'm only an early-stage heaven immortal. I can't compare to the ancestors of the sect. Don't blame Brother G. Come, let's drink. Emperor Bai raised his cup with a smile. Ningqi asked some questions that he wanted to know. As long as White Tharch and Emosia understood, they would answer them. In the end, Ningqi realized that their understanding of the Tiandao family was very one-sided. They might not even be as good as him. At least, he knew that there was a family with the surname Jiang in the Tiandao family. However, Ningqi also obtained a lot of useful information. For example, in the current immortal world, there was no such thing as the heavenly Tao ranking, and there was more than one immortal emperor. On the ancestral star, there were 2 immortal emperors. One of them was called the Moonview Immortal Emperor, and the other was more mysterious. Only his name was known. Apart from the 2 immortal emperors, there were a total of 9 immortal monarchs in the ancestral star. Each of them controlled a celestial city, and there were 2 immortal monarchs in the Emperor Ancestor City, Immortal Monarch Shingong and Immortal Monarch Suiqiu. As the wedding ceremony of Immortal Monarch Shingong's daughter approached, other immortal monarchs who were on good terms with immortal monarchs would come to Emperor Ancestor City to congratulate him. I heard that in order to marry Immortal Monarch Shingong's daughter, that existence from the Tiandao family had brought a supreme-grade Dao item as a betrothal gift. This supreme-grade Dao item was taken from an ancient immortal clan. It's a gourd. I wonder if we can see it during the ceremony. Emosia sighed. A gourd. Ningqi's eyes flickered. Could it be the immortal slaying gourd that the system wanted him to find? The deadline given by the system was 200 years, and it was not long before the deadline. If there was no immortal slaying gourd in the divine tomb, the mission would most likely fail. Ningqi naturally did not wish for the mission to fail, and he was rather concerned about the immortal slaying gourd. After all, it was a legendary artifact. If he could get his hands on it, it would be of great help to him when he faced the Jiang family in the future. However, if it really was the immortal slaying gourd, would the Tiandao family be willing to give it to Immortal Monarch Shingong? Compared to the Jiang family that Ningqi knew, a mere immortal monarch would not be worth their attention. Whatever. Ningqi decided that as long as there was a chance, he would go take a look. If it really was the immortal slaying gourd, how he could get it from Immortal Monarch Shingong and that Tiandao family disciple was a matter for later. Dao item. After the Great War of the Immortals and Demons, there were fewer and fewer Dao items. I wonder if you and I will be able to get one in the future. Bai Di smiled and shook his head. But because of the Great War of the Immortals and Demons, too many Dao items were destroyed? Ningqi suddenly asked. Even if they were destroyed, they can be reforged. More importantly, it is said that the Tao of artifact refinement originated from the ancient immortals. Now that the ancient immortal clan has been suppressed, the number of artifact refinement grandmasters in the world has naturally decreased. There used to be many markets on the ancestral star that sold inferior-grade Tao items, and even mid-grade Tao items. Now, even inferior-grade Dao items are extremely difficult to find. Bai Di said. The ancient immortals are to blame for betraying the entire immortal realm. Emosia drank a mouthful of wine and said in a somewhat disappointed tone. Is that so? Ningqi smiled and said no more. If this was an illusion, then the owner of the tomb must have stood against the ancient immortals. After all, from what he had seen and heard since his arrival, he could feel the contempt the immortals here had for the ancient immortals. Even as the 4 drank, the atmosphere in the 3rd branch of the Dong family was rather somber. The wounds on Dong Kuan's face had recovered. Though Ningqi's attack was a little brutal, it was still pure physical strength, and it mainly left Dong Kuan with superficial wounds and minor internal injuries. As a mid-stage golden immortal, it would not take long for Dong Kuan to recover from such injuries. Is that what happened? You were beaten up by a perfected heavenly immortal in front of countless people? A middle-aged man who resembled Dong Kuan but was much older and emanated a grand Luo aura said flatly. Beside the middle-aged man stood a beautiful woman whose cultivation was the same as the middle-aged man's. Grand Luo. Yes, father. Dong Kuan's expression was a little ugly as he nodded his head. There was a sliver of fear in his eyes, but this fear was not directed at Ning Qi. Instead, it was directed at his father. Chapter 2568. The beautiful woman frowned. Husband, you can't blame Kuan for this. I heard from Kuan that the boy was extremely strong, so he should be a body refinement cultivator. If an ordinary immortal were to fight a body refinement cultivator, they would inevitably suffer a small loss if they weren't careful. If Kuan knew about the other party's background, then that boy would already be dead. Yes. Dong Kuan hurriedly said, Mother, you're right. I was careless for a moment and suffered a loss. If I knew he was a body refiner, I would have surely used other methods to take his head. Humph! A loving mother spoils her son. The middle-aged man glanced at the beautiful woman and then said to Dong Kuan, This time, the immortal monarch gave our Dong family a spot to follow the wedding procession and cultivate there for several years. Your grandfather and the other branches are fighting for this spot, but you were beaten up by a mere heaven immortal, and so many people know about it. If the uncles of the other branches find out about this, don't even think about getting this quota. What? Dong Kuan was shocked. Follow the wedding procession and cultivate there for a few years? Although his father's words were a bit vague, he knew where that side was referring to. This was the most mysterious place in the immortal world. Although he had only cultivated for a few years, if he really went to that place, it would be equivalent to forming a relationship with that place. Such an opportunity was extremely rare. If he had known about this earlier, he wouldn't have gone out to stir up trouble at this critical juncture. Father, is what you said true? I heard that even immortals and immortal emperors can't go there without permission. Dong Kuan stammered. The middle-aged woman was also startled, her face filled with shock. Humph! This piece of news is extremely secretive. If it wasn't for me having a good relationship with the immortal monarch's estate's manager Feng and showing filial respect to him every year, it would be impossible for me to find out about this until now. Your great-grandfather was probably afraid that his subordinates would find out about this and cause some disgraceful things to happen. I just didn't expect you to be such an unfilial son. To lose such an important person at this critical juncture. The middle-aged man said angrily. Husband, what should we do? If Kuan can't get the position, then he won't have the chance to take over the Dong family in this lifetime. The middle-aged woman was a little anxious. Long hair, short vision. Take over the Dong family? How long had the old ancestor lived? If Kuan is like this for the rest of his life, I bet he'll die before the patriarch does. How the hell would he take over the Dong clan? This position was even more important than taking over the Dong clan. If Kuan could please the Dong clan, he might be able to obtain when the time comes. Our Dong clan will no longer have to depend on others. The middle-aged man snorted coldly and cast a disgruntled glance at the beautiful middle-aged woman. When Dong Kuan heard this, he was extremely excited. However, when he thought about how he had been beaten up by Ning Qi, it was very likely that the old ancestor had already heard about it, and the elders of the other branches had probably already heard about it. He felt extremely angry. If this matter was not handled properly, the quota would not fall into his hands. It would only benefit his cousins from the other branches. Right now, there's only one way, and that's to fight back in the same way as the other party. You have to be more ruthless than the other party, and your methods must be more ruthless. Only then will there be a chance to redeem old ancestors' impression of Kuan. However, you can't interfere, and neither can I. The middle-aged man said coldly. But I heard that kid's swordsmanship. The middle-aged woman hesitated. The middle-aged man's eyes revealed a trace of mockery. Now you're willing to say it? You think I don't know? That kid was able to cut off the ears of several golden immortals with one strike. This means that his swordsmanship is extremely terrifying, and he can fight above his level. Even if Koan is fully prepared, he may not be able to gain the upper hand. Father, I can't lose this position, please teach me how to do it. Dong Koan hurriedly cupped his hands. In the beginning, he and his mother didn't intend to say anything about Ning Qi's sword strike, hoping that his father would scold him less. As for revenge, as long as he was in the Emperor Ancestor City, he had countless methods to use. But now that he knew about this position, and that he could only rely on his own strength to regain his reputation, he felt somewhat uneasy. I borrowed this sword from your grandfather. After taking that guy's head, don't say too much, and don't let too many people see it. With your strength, you can only use 10% of its power, but it's enough for you to kill that perfected heaven immortal. The middle-aged man took out a sword. As soon as the sword appeared, a majestic aura of the great Tao swept out. It was many times stronger than a low-grade Tao artifact. Mid-grade Tao artifact? Dong Koan looked at this scene with some excitement and hurriedly took it. With it, he believed that he would definitely be able to take revenge. But this matter couldn't be seen by too many people, otherwise, he would still lose face if it was spread out. But he couldn't let no one see it, otherwise, who would know if he had asked an expert from the Dong family to help him? I've given it to you, do what you want to do. You only have one day. At this time tomorrow, I want to see this Xianfeng sword, and the head of that heaven immortal, the middle-aged man said lightly. Father, mother, don't worry, I definitely won't let you down. Dong Koan put away the Xianfeng sword, and a trace of confidence appeared on his face. With the Dong family's strength in the Emperor Ancestor City, it was not easy to find the whereabouts of Ning Qi and the other three. But fortunately, there were countless people who wanted to please the Dong family, so naturally, there were people who took the initiative to report the whereabouts of Ning Qi and the other three to the Dong family. The next morning, Dong Koan appeared in front of Ning Qi and the other three. The eyes of Mo Xie and the others were cold. If it wasn't for Ning Qi with Mo Xie's character, he would have already mocked Dong Koan's embarrassing appearance yesterday. Perhaps because he was afraid of being beaten up by Ning Qi again, this time Dong Koan learned his lesson and kept a safe distance from Ning Qi. Then, he looked at Ning Qi coldly and said, "Yesterday, I was careless and let you sneak attack me. Today, I want to challenge you to a fight of life and death." Challenge me? The corner of Ning Qi's mouth rose slightly. You're just a loser, not worthy for me to fight. If young Master Dong wants to play, please go somewhere else. Dong Koan thought that Ning Qi would immediately accept the challenge, but he didn't expect that Ning Qi would refuse. For a moment, he was so angry that he didn't know what to say. Seeing this, one of the Dong family's disciples who came with him said coldly, "If you don't even dare to accept my cousin's challenge, then kneel and kowtow 3 times. Brother, there's something wrong with your logic. If I don't accept the challenge, I have to kneel and kowtow? If I accept the challenge, will you kneel and kowtow?" Ning Qi said with a smile. Chapter 2569. That disciple of the Dong family flew into a rage out of humiliation. As a member of the Dong family, he had never been teased like this before. The anger in his heart burst out uncontrollably. With a shout, he directly attacked Ning Qi. Puff! Ning Qi kicked him in the chest. The Dong clan's disciple, whose cultivation base was almost the same as Ning Qi's, was sent flying backward like a cannonball. He landed heavily on the ground several thousand feet away, coughed out a mouthful of blood, and fainted. "All right, I can accept the challenge of a loser like you, but there must be some stakes," Ning Qi said to Dong Koan with a smile. Dong Koan turned his head to look at the disciple who had been kicked unconscious by Ning Qi. Calming the other disciple's anger, he asked Ning Qi, "What kind of stakes do you want?" How about this? If you lose, you'll have to kowtow to my brother Mo 3 times. Ning Qi smiled faintly. Mo stared blankly for a moment, then opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something. However, he didn't know what to say. He could only stare blankly at Ning Qi. He had never imagined that the prize Ning Qi wanted would be related to him. However, by doing so, he would undoubtedly offend the Dong clan. Even if Ning Qi won, he would inevitably suffer the revenge of the Dong family. He didn't know why Ning Qi was so confident, but he was very moved. You want me to kowtow to him? Dong Kun was stunned. He glanced at Mo Xie and almost couldn't control the anger in his heart. He wanted to draw out the mysterious wind sword and kill Ning Qi. However, his father's words were still ringing in his ears. He had to keep a low profile. If he took out the mysterious wind sword in the street, everyone would know that the Dong family had given him a mid-grade Dao artifact. Yes, if you want, I will reluctantly beat you again. That's right. If you are willing, I will reluctantly beat you up again. What if you lose? Dong Kun said coldly. What if you lose? Dong Kun said coldly. I'm sorry, I didn't expect that, because I won't lose. Sorry, I didn't think of that. Because I won't lose. Alright, I agree to your bet. Okay, I accept the stakes. Dong Kun suddenly smiled and told Ning Qi the time and place. Then, he turned around and left. He had figured it out. Ning Qi was going to die in the afternoon. It didn't matter what the stakes were. As long as he killed Ning Qi, he would have a chance to compete with his cousins for the poor one. Quota. To Dong Kun, this was the most important matter. After Dong Kun left, Emperor Bai looked at Ning Qi worriedly. Brother Ning, no matter who wins or loses, it won't be easy to clean up this mess. You shouldn't have agreed to Dong Kun's challenge. Since he dares to challenge you, he must have some trump cards. Mo Xie also said, although I'm looking forward to Dong Kun kowtowing to me, this matter will affect you greatly. If the Dong family really doesn't care about their reputation, they won't be able to escape the ancestral star even if they manage to escape from Emperor Ancestor City. At this point, he seemed to have thought of something and a hint of hatred flashed in his eyes. The sword sect he was from had been annihilated because of this. No one had expected that the Dong clan would send elders from the first branch, second branch, and third branch to the Gathering Cave province just because of a few words of criticism. The joint forces of 3 Xian immortals caused Mo Xie's sect to be annihilated without being able to resist at all. Only he survived, and the reason he survived was because Dong Kun wasn't willing to kill him and wanted to humiliate him from time to time. Facing such a ruthless family, Ning Qi's choice this time could very well lead to him being assassinated by the Dong clan. This, although I can't see through Brother Ning's fate, I feel that Brother Ning is a man of longevity. At least, you won't die in Emperor Ancestor City. Ji Fei suddenly said. Brother Ji, did you really see through something? Don't try to fool us. Mo Xie was in disbelief. From Emperor Bai's expression, it seemed like he didn't have much confidence in Ji Fei either. After all, when they first met, Ji Fei had already said that the two of them would become immortal lords. If it was just one person, there was some credibility. But two people becoming immortal lords together? That would be absurd. Alright, don't worry about it. Brother Mo, get ready and wait for Dong Kun to kowtow to you. Ning Qi smiled. Mo Xie was slightly taken aback. What if he doesn't? Then kill him. I can see that he's afraid of death. The corner of Ning Qi's lips curled up. After saying that, Ning Qi suddenly looked in one direction. He saw a few familiar figures, but they didn't seem to see him. Everyone, this place is really strange. I've lived for so long, but I've never seen such a realistic illusion. Say, if this is real, then don't we have a great opportunity? The ancestral star hasn't declined yet, there are treasures everywhere. South Sea's turtle-riding old man said in a low voice as he followed behind the figures with a wretched expression. In front of him were Li Si, Bai Xingxue, and Tai Yuan. The four of them had only met each other when they arrived at Emperor Ancestor City. Not an illusion? Haha, South Sea, do you think this could be real? It's just a divine tomb. Even if the tomb owner's cultivation is monstrous and he's still alive, he doesn't have the means to send us back to the past, right? Li Si's lips curled into a mocking smile. Brother Tai Yuan, what do you think? Bai Xingxue looked at Tai Yuan. Tai Yuan looked in the direction of the immortal monarch mansion and said with a spurious smile, "If this is just an illusion and we can't break it, then won't we be trapped in this illusion until we die of old age?" Everyone's expressions turned solemn when they heard that. The possibility of that happening was extremely high. But one formation core is definitely not enough to set up such an illusion. As long as we find one of the formation cores and break it, the illusion will be broken. I think there might be one formation core in Emperor Ancestor City. Tai Yuan smiled. You mean, the immortal monarch mansion? Li Si was not stupid. He could guess from the direction Tai Yuan was looking at. This Xingong immortal monarch's daughter is going to be married soon. At that time we can take the opportunity to sneak in and find the formation core. What do you think? Tai Yuan nodded. That's also a way, but although this place is an illusion and the immortal monarch might not be real, since the illusion is so real, this Xingong immortal monarch's means must not be underestimated. If we're discovered, Li Si's face showed a hint of hesitation. Perhaps you can also choose to live here. This era is much better than our time, Tai Yuan smiled. We'll do as you say, Bai Xingxue said. If this place was real, he might choose to stay. That way, as long as he lived to that era, his cultivation would definitely be unparalleled. Unfortunately, this was only an illusion. He would not allow himself to be lost in an illusion. He still had great ambitions. Chapter 2570. Emperor Ancestor City. On the Immortals' Battle Stage. This was the place where the geniuses of Emperor Ancestor City could settle their grudges in private. Once on the Immortals' Battle Stage, their fates were in their own hands. The grudges settled on the Immortals' Battle Stage, regardless of life or death. Even if one side had a powerful background, they could not use their power to oppress others. This was the rule set by Xingong Immortal Lord. Even the Dong family did not dare to violate it. As for whether they would secretly take revenge in a few years, this was not something that the crowd should consider. At least, it was not something that Ningqi should consider. There were 99 Immortals battle stages in Ancestor Emperor City. When Ningqi arrived, 98 of them were already occupied. Immortals of different levels were fighting on them, and it looked like they were determined to kill each other. There were many people watching from the surroundings, but Dong Kuan's Immortals battle stage was the only spectators nearby. The Immortals battle stage occupied by Dong Kuan was less crowded, with only 100 or so people scattered around. Dong Kuan sat on the Immortals battle stage with his eyes closed. As if sensing Ningqi's arrival, he opened his eyes slightly and looked at Ningqi. "I thought you wouldn't dare to come." Dong Kuan smiled. "Everyone, please take a seat. Let's go have a drink after I finish this guy." Ningqi smiled at Mo Xie and the other two, ignoring Dong Kuan. This scene made the corner of Dong Kuan's eyes twitch. He was obviously very angry. "Brother Ning, be careful." Mo Xie and the other two nodded. Their expressions were somewhat solemn. Since Dong Kuan dared to ask Ningqi to fight to the death on the Immortals battle stage, it meant that the other party must have a trump card to win. The patriarch of the Dong family was a primordial unity true immortal and was born as Xingong Immortal Lord's personal servant. His foundation was much stronger than the other two families. In such a battle, the Dong family was likely to give Dong Kuan several trump cards that could kill Ningqi. This is strange. With Dong Quan's character, there should be at least tens of thousands of people sitting here. Why are there only 100 or so people here today? Mo Xie looked around and was slightly startled. Look. Bai Di pointed in several directions with his mouth. Mo Xie and Ji Fei discovered that experts from the Dong family were hiding in the area. Anyone who tried to enter the area to watch the battle would be asked to leave. The reason why they hadn't discovered them was because the experts from the Dong family were willing to let them in. It seems that Dong Quan does not wish for too many people to witness today's match. Most of the people here today have extremely good relationships with the third branch that he is in. Some of them are even good friends of Dong Quan. This match should not be too glorious. Emperor Bai said solemnly, "If Brother Ning is in danger, no matter what, I will help." Mo Xie said coldly, "The two of you must believe in my Tao of calculation. Brother Ning will not be in danger." Ji Fei smiled. "I hope so." Bai Di and Mo Xie looked at each other. Even if Ning Qi wasn't in danger after today, he would have thoroughly offended the Dong clan. Who knew what the Dong clan would do to him in the future? The Immortals' battle stage was 10 feet tall. With a light leap, Ning Qi landed on the Immortals' battle stage. Seeing this, Dong Quan slowly stood up, maintaining a distance of over 100 feet between him and Ning Qi. "Young Master Dong, why don't you kowtow to Brother Mo 3 times? That way, you won't have to suffer any physical pain. What do you think?" Ning Qi smiled at Dong Quan. "You seem to think that you've already won?" Dong Quan looked at Ning Qi indifferently. He was trying his best to quell the anger in his heart. Only in this way would he not be provoked by Ning Qi and make any reckless moves. "Yes." Ning Qi gently nodded. "Ah. I didn't know you were a body refinement cultivator yesterday, and I wasn't paying attention. That's why your surprise attack succeeded. A mere perfection stage heavenly immortal like you dares to boast shamelessly before me? I'll kill you here today." Dong Quan grinned hideously. He didn't seem to want to talk to Ning Qi anymore. As soon as he finished speaking, a swift and fierce sword light flew towards Ning Qi. This sword light was silent, and it originally had an extremely majestic aura of the Great Way, but it was also trapped in it by some method, so it didn't leak out at all. Perhaps he could tell that this was a mid-grade Tao artifact immortal sword. Dong Quan was very happy in his heart. As long as he took Ning Qi's head, this matter would come to an end, and he would have the qualification to obtain the quota. Obtaining the quota was tantamount to reaching the sky in a single bound. Middle-grade Tao artifact? This is your trump card? Ning Qi's voice suddenly sounded in Dong Quan's ear. For some reason, Dong Quan had a bad feeling in his heart. From the other party's tone, it seemed that he was somewhat disdainful of his Xianfeng sword. After all, this was the Tao artifact used by his grandfather, a magic treasure of a Xian immortal. Why would a heavenly immortal be so disdainful? A black light rose from Ning Qi's hand. Black, a low-grade immortal artifact, and Xianfeng sword, a mid-grade Tao artifact, collided in an instant. The tip of the sword collided with the tip of the sword. The next moment, black shattered inch by inch. Seeing this scene, Dong Quan heaved a long sigh of relief in his heart. It seemed that his feeling was just an illusion. The other party was still going to die. But then, Dong Quan couldn't help but take a deep breath and looked at the scene in front of him in disbelief. After black in Ning Qi's hand shattered inch by inch, the aura of the Great Way that was locked on the Xianfeng sword suddenly disappeared. Then, as if following in the footsteps of black, the Xianfeng sword also turned into pieces and fell to the ground. There was no longer any luster on it. Let alone a Tao artifact, it was not even a fairy artifact. The Emotion Destroyer swordsmanship was the Tao Destroyer swordsmanship. Since it was a Tao artifact, it was naturally within the scope of being destroyed. However, There were other factors involved in being able to exchange black for a mid-grade Dao artifact this time. Dong Kuan's strength was not good enough, and he could only exert 1/10 of the power of this mid-grade Dao artifact. If it was the original owner or a Zenith Heaven who held it, Ning Qi's Emotion Destroyer swordsmanship would not be able to destroy this Dao artifact. To destroy this Dao artifact, he would probably have to take out a 3-pointed, double-edged sword. But even so, it was enough to prove the horror of the Emotion Destroyer swordsmanship. If it was used against a low-grade Dao artifact, it could be easily destroyed like killing a Zenith Heaven. After black was broken, Ning Qi put it away. Ning Qi knew that it would not take long for it to recover. At that time, it would probably be able to advance to a mid-grade fairy artifact. Is this your trump card? The corners of Ning Qi's mouth rose slightly. How could you destroy the Xianfeng sword? Dong Kuan stared at Ning Qi with a trace of horror in his eyes. Only 10% of it was caused by Ning Qi, and the other 90% was caused by the thought that he could not go back and explain to his father and grandfather that the Xianfeng sword was destroyed. Chapter 2571. What to do? Nothing. Ning Qi's fist mercilessly destroyed the immortal qi that covered Dong Kuan's body and landed on his flesh. Puff! Dong Kuan's body flew back with a muffled sound, but Ning Qi followed him like a shadow, grabbed his neck and smashed him to the ground. Boom! The hundreds of spectators were dumbfounded. They did not expect Dong Kuan to be at a disadvantage in just one exchange. Perhaps it was not a disadvantage, but a complete lack of power to fight back. The experts of the Dong family who came with Dong Kuan were livid. The Immortals battle stage had its own rules. Even if they wanted to help, they did not have the guts. Where is Dong Kuan's trump card? Mo Xie was stunned. Emperor Bai and Ji Fei looked at each other and saw the confusion in each other's eyes. Normally, Dong Kuan would only dare to challenge Ning Qi if he had a trump card. But now they could not tell what Dong Kuan's trump card was. No one knew that Dong Kuan's trump card was the pile of broken fragments on the ground. Is that Dong Kuan? How did he get beaten up so badly on the Immortals battle stage? The spectators from the other 98 Immortals battle stages looked over from afar. Originally, their attention was on the Immortals battle stage in front of them. But now that the victor had been decided and they were preparing to leave, they couldn't help but be attracted by Ning Qi. Then, they saw Dong Kuan being beaten miserably. Then, they saw Dong Kuan being beaten up by Ning Qi. However, due to the fact that there was a thin layer of mist between each Immortals battle stage, they weren't able to get a good look at it. Therefore, they weren't sure if this Dong Kuan was the same Dong Kuan they knew. When they tried to enter the Immortals battle stage to get a better look, they were stopped by experts from the Dong clan. Wasn't this a blatant lie? They looked thoughtfully at the blurry scene in front of them. Immortal vanquishing palm. Dong Kuan was a little confused after being beaten up by Ning Qi, but he still found an opportunity to hit Ning Qi with his palm. Boundless immortal qi gathered on Dong Kuan's palm, and then an aura several times more terrifying than a golden immortal swept towards Ning Qi. 6th stage Immortal Vanquishing Palm? I heard that this is the unique skill that made Shingong Immortal Monarch famous when he was young. I didn't expect him to pass it on to the Dong family. It seems like the relationship between the patriarch of the Dong family and Shingong Immortal Monarch is really deep. With Dong Kuan's golden immortal cultivation, his essence will definitely be damaged if he uses this Tier 6 immortal art. After this battle, even if he wins, he will have to recuperate for 1,000 years. The moment the immortal vanquishing palm was unleashed, whether it was the spectators that Dong Kuan had deliberately let in or the spectators who were blocked outside by the experts of the Dong family, a trace of surprise flashed in their eyes. At the same time, many people looked at Dong Kuan with jealousy in their eyes. There weren't many geniuses who could learn a 6th-stage immortal art at the golden immortal stage. After all, even some Grand Luo might not possess a Tier 6 celestial art. Only a descendant of the Dong clan like Dong Kuan could enjoy such benefits. Not good, Brother Ning is in danger. Mo Xie was startled. However, Ji Fei's expression did not change. Clearly, he was very confident in his Tao of divination. With a golden immortal cultivation and a 6th-stage immortal art, even if the power of this palm was not comparable to that of a Grand Luo golden immortal, it was at least equivalent to the full force attack of a perfected golden immortal. At this moment, Dong Kuan already had the ability to fight above his level, and his opponent was only a perfected heavenly immortal. Could he block this immortal vanquishing palm? Baidi's expression was solemn, his mind racing. He seemed to be thinking about how he would end today's situation if Ning Qi lost. Bang! Ning Qi and Dong Kuan's palm collided. The difference was that Dong Kuan had used an immortal art, while Ning Qi had only used his palm. How is this possible? Dong Kuan's face was filled with disbelief when he saw that Ning Qi had only taken 2 steps back. He was not the only one. Everyone who saw this scene, including the experts of the Dong family, had a look of shock on their faces. What realm has Brother Ning's body-tempering art reached? He can actually resist Dong Kuan's immortal vanquishing palm? Mo Xie muttered to himself. It's said that body-tempering art can greatly increase one's combat strength below the Grand Luo realm. The ancients were not lying. Ji Fei sighed. Baidi nodded in agreement. It was just that everyone understood the principle, but the number of immortals who cultivated in body-tempering techniques was still very few. Although the body-tempering techniques were uneven, the main reason was that the cultivation of body-tempering techniques was extremely difficult, and one had to put their body in danger. Everyone liked to stand far away and throw their immortal arts, flying swords, and not even they liked to fight in close quarters with others, and they did not have a bright future. After all, immortals were not as gifted as the demon race. The advantage of immortals was their immortal arts and various divine abilities. If they cultivated their body like the demon race, they would inevitably feel like they had abandoned the great Tao to learn the minor Tao. You know that I'm a body-tempering cultivator, but you still use this kind of close combat immortal art? If you were a profound immortal, perhaps I would have to dodge. Unfortunately, you're only a golden immortal. After opening the 8 gates of the 9 inner hidden gates, Ning Qi's physical strength had reached an extremely terrifying level. Moreover, after turning into immortal, his demon Tao cultivation base had skyrocketed to the heavenly demon great perfection. The few minor realms that he had crossed had greatly increased Ning Qi's basic physical strength. Before Dong Kuan used the immortal vanquishing palm, Ning Qi had only opened 7 gates of the 9 inner hidden gate. Now, he had opened all 8 gates. Don't come over. Dong Kuan saw Ning Qi walking towards him step by step, and his eyes suddenly revealed a look of horror. He had used up all his trump cards, and there was no other method that could give him enough confidence to deal with Ning Qi. I admit defeat, I surrender. Dong Kuan saw that Ning Qi had already walked in front of him, and immediately said decisively. Today he had lost. Instead of being beaten to death, it was better to be straightforward and avoid physical pain. In the audience seats, most of the people did not look very good. Their purpose of coming here today was to see Dong Kuan defeat his opponent, not to see the opponent defeat Dong Kuan. Only Mo Xie and the other 2 had a trace of a smile on their faces. Mo Xie was even more delighted. Seeing his enemy being beaten like a dog by Ning Qi, he almost couldn't help but look up to the sky and laugh 3 times. Admit defeat? Then kowtow to Brother Mo 3 times. Ning Qi smiled faintly and said, We agreed before, did you forget? Kowtow? Dong Kuan's expression changed. He glanced at Mo Xie and couldn't help but clench his fist. He looked at Ning Qi and said through gritted teeth, I can give you whatever you want, but can you not kowtow 3 times? Of course not. No matter what you do, you have to keep your promise. Ning Qi smiled. Do you really want to offend my Dong family? Dong Kuan's face darkened. Chapter 2572. Dong Kuan felt a chill run through his body. A killing intent as dense as the northern wind shrouded him. This killing intent didn't seem fake. The other party really dared to kill him. One must keep one's promise. Since I promised before, I will naturally keep it. Dong Kuan smiled and kowtowed 3 times in Emosie's direction. Then, he looked at Ning Qi and asked, Is that enough? You know when to yield and when to stand tall. Not bad. Ning Qi smiled and nodded. Although Dong Kuan had a smile on his face, his heart was bleeding. Endless humiliation filled his heart. He swore that he would make Ning Qi suffer 100 times the humiliation today. When the crowd in the spectator stand saw this scene, they all had strange expressions on their faces. Quite a few people looked at Dong Kuan with disgust. Even though they had a good relationship with Dong Kuan before this, Dong Kuan had kowtowed in order to save his life. He had already thrown away all his dignity. Associating with such a person would only bring shame to oneself. The experts of the Dong family looked at each other with grave expressions. If today's events were to spread, the Dong family would definitely become a laughingstock. Emosie's eyes flickered. Watching Dong Kuan kowtow 3 times, he felt extremely pleased. However, at the same time, he also felt a trace of worry. This enmity was unresolvable. We will meet again someday. Dong Kuan glanced at Ning Qi. After a short period of rest, his flesh wounds had healed by 70 to 80%. At least walking was not a problem. Wait. Ning Qi smiled. Dong Kuan's body stiffened. He looked at Ning Qi and asked, Is there something else? There was once a person called Han Xian. He endured the humiliation of being groped and later became the emperor. Ning Qi smiled. What does that have to do with me? Dong Kuan frowned. An ominous premonition rose in his heart. You kowtowed 3 times to Brother Mo today. In the future, you may rise like Han Xian. So, I can't let you leave. Ning Qi sighed. What? Dong Kuan looked at Ning Qi in disbelief. He had already kowtowed, but the other party still did not intend to let him leave? I heard that dying on the Immortals battle stage is a meaningless death, because the rules of the Immortals battle stage were set by immortal monarch Shingong himself. So, Brother Dong, have a safe journey. Wait. If you kill me, my father won't let you off. Whoosh. Fresh blood slowly seeped out from Dong Kuan's forehead. Even at the moment of his death, he still couldn't believe it. Why did this fellow in front of him dare to kill him? Why? He was the pride of the Dong family. Dong Kuan's eyes were wide open as he glared at Ning Qi with incomparable resentment. However, the luster in his eyes was gradually dissipating and turning gray. Emperor Bai and Emosia looked at each other in disbelief, then looked at Ji Fei. Before they came to Emperor Ancestral City, Ji Fei said that as long as Emosia entered Emperor Ancestral City, Dong Kuan would die. However, the two of them never expected that Ning Qi would be the one to kill Dong Kuan. But if that was the case, would Ning Qi still have a way out? Even if the Dong family did not dare to show respect to Shingong Immortal Lord in front of the Emperor Ancestor, could it be that Ning Qi would never leave Emperor Ancestor City for the rest of his life? Young Master! A few angry roars sounded out. The experts of the Dong clan who came with Dong Kuan all rushed onto the stage to check on Dong Kuan's injuries. However, they discovered that Dong Kuan was no longer breathing. He was already dead. The Dong family was one of the 3 great clans of the Imperial Ancestor City and had a close relationship with the Shingong Immortal Lord. Many Grand Luo usually sought refuge with the Dong family and took up the position of Reverend, hoping to use the Dong family's connection to join the Shingong Immortal Lord's tutelage. Right now, there was even a Grand Luo Reverend among the elite. This was because he had been ordered by Dong Kuan's father, Dong Jingyan, to look after Dong Kuan. Thus, when he saw that Dong Kuan had been killed by Ning Qi, his eyes instantly turned red. This was not sadness but anger. He ignored the rules of the Immortal's battle stage and slashed at Ning Qi. If he violated the rules of the Celestial Monarch, the Patriarch of the Dong clan would intervene, and he might not be killed. But if he didn't kill Ning Qi today to quell Dong Jingyan's anger, he would definitely die. This multiple-choice question was very simple. Die! His sword was enveloped in the aura of the Great Tao. This was the difference between a Grand Luo and an ordinary immortal. In terms of quality, the qi of immortal qi was weaker than the power of the Great Tao. On the other hand, a Grand Luo had already grown a celestial tree and attained the fruit of the way, allowing him to control the power of the Great Tao slightly. To him, no matter how strong Ning Qi's swordsmanship was, it would be difficult for him to surpass him. He would survive this strike. Oh no, the Dong clan is shameless! Mo Xie roared in rage, his eyes almost bursting with blood. At the same time, one of the mystic immortals who watched over the immortals' battle stage all year round opened his eyes as well, and immediately arrived above Ning Qi and the Dong clan's honorable. After seeing the situation clearly, he did not make a move, and instead stared coldly at Ning Qi. Whoosh! Another strike. After that, Ning Qi calmly raised his head and exchanged glances with the mystic immortal in the sky, before leaping off the immortal's battle stage and walking outside. Mo Xie and the other two were stunned for a moment before hurriedly following him. However, their eyes were filled with a hint of shock and confusion. The spectators only found it strange that the Grand Luo would freeze on the spot after making a move. Only the mystic immortal seemed to have noticed something, and a hint of shock flashed through his eyes as he looked at Ning Qi with a hint of fear. Is he that person's disciple? Honorable Tang? The remaining experts of the Dong clan were stunned. One of them couldn't help but walk towards the motionless Tang. However, before he could reach him, he saw Tang fall to the ground with a loud bang. There was also a wound on his forehead that was similar to the one on Dong Kuan's forehead. Blood was flowing out of it. There was no sign of life on his body at all. Honorable Tang is dead? How is that possible? The experts of the Dong clan and the spectators were all in disbelief. How could Honorable Tang die just like that? Everyone subconsciously looked at the mystic immortal in the sky. I didn't kill him, but he violated the rules set by the Immortal Lord, so he deserved to die. The mystic immortal said calmly. With that, he moved and disappeared before everyone's eyes. If he didn't kill him, then who could it be? Everyone looked at each other, and their faces turned pale. There was only one possibility. Honorable Tang, who was a Grand Luo, was likely killed by that heavenly immortal, just like Dong Kuan. But what kind of monster could kill someone who was 2 levels above him? Wasn't that a little too terrifying? Even if Grand Luo fought against Grand Luo, it would not be easy for one to kill the other. What more, a heavenly immortal? The being that Dong Kuan provoked this time is definitely not simple. Perhaps he's from that side. That side. The Heavenly Tao clan. Chapter 2573. Mo Xie and the other two followed behind Ning Qi in silence. After walking 2 streets, the 3 of them finally could not take it anymore and pulled Ning Qi into a restaurant. Brother Ning, is the Dong family's revered elder dead? Baidi's eyes were bright. Mo Xie and Ji Fei also wanted to ask this question, so the 2 stared at Ning Qi as if they were interrogating him. Yes, he's dead. Ning Qi smiled. A celestial immortal killing a Grand Luo. Brother Ning, you still say that you don't belong to any sect? I'm afraid even someone like Brother Mo, who specializes in sword Dao, has never seen such godly swordsmanship before, right? Bai Di smiled bitterly. Mo Xie nodded, indicating that she had indeed never seen it before. Ji Fei quickly pinched his fingers, as if he wanted to divine Ning Qi's origins. However, no matter how he did it, Ning Qi's life providence was still shrouded in a layer of fog. He couldn't see it clearly no matter what. Brother Ning, you killed Dong Kun. With the Dong family's character, they might not dare to kill you openly in Emperor Ancestral City, but they will definitely send people to hunt you down once you leave the city. By then, even the immortal monarch's mansion will turn a blind eye. So, tell us where your sect is, and I will send a message for you. Even if I die, I will help you deliver the message, and ask your sect elders to come and take you away. Mo Xie said solemnly. Although he and Bai Di were curious and wanted to know Ning Qi's background, the more important reason was that Mo Xie planned to deliver the message for Ning Qi. My sect is very far away. Brother Mo, you won't be able to deliver the message even if you run for 10,000 years. Ning Qi smiled and shook his head. So far away? Mo Xie was stunned. Brother Ning is not an immortal from the ancestral star? Did I say I'm from the ancestral star? Ning Qi looked at Mo Xie with a faint smile. At this moment, Ji Fei suddenly looked at Ning Qi in shock. Brother Ning, I can't see through your fate. Are you from the Tiandao family? At this point, he seemed to feel that he had guessed correctly. He said somewhat excitedly, My Yi Xian sect's patriarch once said that all the people from the heavenly Dao family jumped out. Outside the three realms, not within the five elements. Even the underworld's book of life and death doesn't contain their names. That's why I can't divine your origins. Is it because you're from the Tiandao clan? Tiandao clan? Bai Di and Mo Xie sucked in a breath of cold air and looked at Ning Qi in disbelief. This man in front of them had an extremely high alcohol tolerance and was rather refreshing. Brother Ning, who they had met by chance and killed Dong Kun for Mo Xie, was from the Tiandao family? Brother Ning, is what Brother Ji said true? Are you really from the Tiandao family? If that's the case, why should I be afraid of the Dong clan? Even if they had 10 guts, they wouldn't dare to touch you. Mo Xie was a little excited. The White Emperor seemed to believe it as well, because he recalled Ning Qi's incredibly mysterious sword art. He was only a full-fledged heavenly immortal, and yet he could slay a grand Luo. Perhaps only a prodigy from the Tiandao clan could do that? What are you talking about? Do I look like someone from the Tiandao clan? Ning Qi was startled, but then he smiled. Mo Xie and the other two looked at each other, and suddenly laughed. Right. How could Brother Ning be from the Tiandao clan? Come, let's drink. Mo Xie smiled. Let's drink. Ji Fei also picked up the wine jug and poured himself some wine. The White Emperor looked at Ning Qi with a faint smile and said softly, Since Brother Ning doesn't want to talk about this, we'll just drink today. Let's drink. Ning Qi smiled and shook his head. These three guessed so much, and they really guessed something. Could it be considered a coincidence? But is this really an illusion? Such an illusion is no different from reality. The divine art of the Divine Tomb's master is really quite powerful. Ning Qi could not help but criticize in his mind. Mo Xie and the other two guessed correctly. While Ning Qi did not have any good feelings for the Tiandao clan, the brand on his body was real, and even that senior called him a dog of the Tiandao clan, fool. A voice rang in Ning Qi's mind. Ning Qi felt the silver dragon tattoo on his body seemed to be heating up. What? You call me a fool every time you have the strength to speak? Aren't you a fool? You can't even tell the difference between illusion and reality. Tell me, are you a fool? Of course I can tell it's an illusion. Wait, what do you mean? You already know why ask. You're really a fool. Ning Qi's expression became solemn. He did not care about the silver dragon calling him a fool anymore. You said that all this is real? Not an illusion? Of course. Then I've returned to the past? That's right. Ningqi suddenly panicked. For so many years, ever since he left the Qin Tang Empire, he had not panicked. But now, he was panicking. He had returned to the past? Then his wife, his brothers, his friends, and everything he cared about had not been born yet? I can feel that you're panicking. Why are you panicking? You think you can't go back? You must be dreaming. You can only come to this era because someone specially set up the reincarnation array. You can only stay here for a short 10 years. I advise you to use these 10 years to improve yourself. The current ancestral star is much more terrifying than the one you'll be staying in the future, but there are also many more opportunities. For example, the betrothal gift brought by immortal Lord Shengong's future son-in-law is a good thing. After saying this, the silver dragon disappeared. No matter how Ningqi called out to it in his heart, it did not make a sound. Reincarnation Array. 10 years. While Ningqi breathed a sigh of relief, he was even more terrified of the Lord of the Divine Tomb's means. There was actually a divine power that could reverse time in this world? If someone used this to kill their future enemies, wouldn't it be 100% accurate shot? How difficult would it be for an immortal to change history? One could have such a divine power, but the person with this divine power would still die, leaving behind a grave. Brother Ning, drink. What are you thinking about? Emosie's voice woke Ningqi from his deep thoughts. Come, let's drink. Brother Emo, Brother Bai, Brother Ji, today the four of us will drink until we're drunk. Ningqi shouted. Waiter, serve the wine. Emosie was taken aback. Emperor Bai and Ji Fei suddenly realized that the way Ningqi looked at them seemed to have changed a little. It was an indescribable change. If they knew that Ningqi had been treating them as illusions, and now he was seeing them as real people, who knew if they would fight Ningqi on the spot? Chapter 2574. Although Ji Fei knew more than Emperor Bai and Emosie, he knew very little about the Tiandao clan. He only knew that the disciple of the Tiandao clan, who was marrying immortal Lord Shengong's daughter, had brought a gourd-shaped supreme-grade Dao weapon, but he didn't know what it did. Got it. But Ningqi felt that Silver Dragon seemed to know a lot about this gourd. Otherwise, why would it suggest Ningqi to steal it? Although the Silver Dragon didn't say it clearly, Ningqi understood most of its meaning. If the Samsara array was real, then the Silver Dragon was likely to have experienced this period. It must know a lot about the origin of the gourd. Unfortunately, it disappeared halfway through its sentence. Otherwise, Ningqi would have asked it if this gourd was the immortal slaying gourd. While Ningqi and the others were drinking and chatting, the atmosphere in the third house of the Jiang family was extremely heavy. Dong Kun and Minister Tang's corpses lay in a large hall. Dong Jingyan sat in the main seat of the hall. Several Dong family experts who had followed Dong Kun to the Immortals battle stage were kneeling on the ground, trembling slightly. Beads of sweat trickled down their foreheads. Dong Jingyan hadn't said a word for a long time. He just quietly looked at Dong Kun's corpse. As for Minister Tang, he didn't even look at him. Such a strange atmosphere truly caused the experts of the Dong clan to shudder with fear, and they were deeply afraid that their heads would fall to the ground in the next moment. Not long after, the sound of hurried footsteps broke the deathly silence. A beautiful woman rushed into the hall. When she saw Dong Kun's lifeless corpse, 2 streams of tears immediately flowed from her eyes. She didn't make a fuss, nor did she curse. Instead, she calmly walked to Dong Jingyan's side and sat down. Who killed Kun? The middle-aged woman asked. Dong Jingyan looked at her in surprise. He died at the hands of that heaven immortal. Minister Tang? Was he killed by the sect elder of that heaven immortal? What's his background? The middle-aged woman continued. He also died at the hands of that heaven immortal. Dong Jingyan said. A trace of shock flashed through the beautiful middle-aged woman's eyes, and even the grief of Dong Kuen's death was somewhat diluted. While Tang had just recently ascended to the Grand Luo realm and had condensed a single Dao fruit, he was considered the weakest among the Dong family's retainers. However, a Grand Luo was a Grand Luo after all. It was an exceptionally distinct boundary among the 9 immortal realms. Human immortals, earthly immortals, heavenly immortals and golden immortals were in fact similar existences. The only difference was that they differed in strength. However, a Grand Luo who had attained Dao fruition was completely different from the other 4 stages. It was like the difference between a 3-year-old child and an 18-year-old adult. From a human immortal to a golden immortal within the age of 3. Grand Luo, on the other hand, were 18. Even though the Zenith Heaven immortal realm had only attained the Dao fruit and had yet to truly develop the power of the great Dao, how could such an existence be killed by a heavenly immortal? That celestial immortal. The middle-aged woman's lips seemed to tremble slightly. From that side? It hasn't been confirmed yet, but it's highly possible. Dong Jingyan nodded. Kun died for nothing? The middle-aged woman was a little dazed. There's a way to confirm this kid's origins. If he didn't come from that side, I'll seek justice for Kun regardless of his background. Dong Jingyan said. What about Eunuch's profound wind sword? The middle-aged woman seemed to have guessed Dong Jingyan's method and changed her tone. It's destroyed. Dong Jingyan's eyes flashed with a hint of exhaustion, as if the destruction of the profound wind sword was more difficult for him than Dong Kuen's death. The profound wind sword is destroyed, and High Official Tang is dead. What are they still doing here? The middle-aged woman said lightly. Although her voice was faint, the Dong family experts present felt a sharp murderous intent enveloping them, causing their bodies to tremble violently. Spare us! The begging voices were extinguished as soon as they started. Dong Jingyan clawed lightly, and the few surviving experts of the Dong family were powerless to resist. Their heads exploded. Even their souls couldn't escape, and they were turned to ashes. At the same time, the phantom of an immortal tree flashed over Dong Jingyan's head. There were 13 fruits hanging from it. Many. The date of Shingong Immortal Lord's daughter's wedding was approaching, and the ceremony would be held in a month's time. There were several times more immortals in Imperial Ancestor City compared to when Ning Qi and the others first entered the city. The streets were bustling with people, and even Grand Luo were a common sight. There are so many Grand Luo of this era compared to the future, Ning Qi could not help but sigh. The 3,000 young boys and girls following Zhuqiu Immortal Lord back then were all Grand Luo, which proved that while the homeworld was not at its prime, it was not far from it. Brother Ning, what did you just say? The White Emperor did a double take. Nothing. Ning Qi smiled. Someone has been following us in the dark for the past few days. It must be an expert of the Dong family. The White Emperor's expression was rather solemn. Ji Fei nodded. There was a flash of coldness in Mo Xie's eyes, and his lips curled into a mocking smile. The Dong family really is not resigned to this. Even if Dong Kun dies in the Immortals' battlistage, they would choose to retaliate in secret. As he spoke, he looked towards a certain direction where a Grand Luo was passing by. Perhaps sensing Mo Xie's gaze, the Grand Luo turned to look at Ning Qi and the others once before leaving without a word. Let them follow us if they want to. Ning Qi smiled and didn't seem to mind at all. There was one thing he was certain of. The authority of Shingong Immortal Lord was not to be trifled with in Imperial Ancestor City. As a former servant of Shingong Immortal Lord, the Dong family patriarch was naturally aware of that, which was why they would not go to great lengths to exact vengeance on Ning Qi in Imperial Ancestor City. Ning Qi, on the other hand, would leave this place in 10 years. If push came to shove, he would hide in a top cultivation training ground for some time. No matter what happened, the Dong family would not be able to find a chance to kill him. Still, the Dong family would not be aware of that. To them, 10 years was a very short period of time and they could afford to wait. That was why Ningqi was actually very safe in those 10 years. Seeing how calm Ningqi was, the White Emperor and the other two Grand Luo Immortal Lords seemed to recall his background and smiled, seemingly not as fearful of the Dong family. And senior brother Ning? Li Zhangtong and the others suddenly popped their heads out from the crowd and looked at Ningqi in surprise. Senior brother Ning. Chapter 2575. Brother Ning, are these your junior brothers and sisters? Bai Di asked curiously. Ningqi looked at the three of them and knew that they also thought that Li Zhangtong and the others were disciples of the Tiandao family. When did you guys arrive? Ningqi looked at Li Zhangtong, Yan Feiwu and Yang Xiaolong. There were only 9 bronze chairs in the hall. They shouldn't have appeared in Emperor Ancestor City so early. Senior brother Ning, we arrived at Emperor Ancestor City as soon as we left the mountain gate. Li Zhangtong's eyes moved slightly. Whether it was reality or an illusion, Li Zhangtong and the others had been very careful. The mountain gate she mentioned naturally represented the divine tomb. Ningqi nodded. It seemed that Li Zhangtong and the others were directly sent to Emperor Ancestor City by the reincarnation formation. At this time, Yan Feiwu and Yang Xiaolong looked at Emperor Bai and the others, then looked at Ningqi strangely. From their point of view, everything here should be an illusion. Why would Ningqi interact with people in an illusion? Wasn't he afraid that they were a method the tomb owner used to kill the tomb robbers? The three of them had been in Emperor Ancestor City for a long time. Apart from strolling around and listening to some news, they had never interacted with any cultivators in Emperor Ancestor City. Emperor Ancestor City has been quite lively recently. Be careful. Ningqi smiled. With that, he bid farewell to Bai Di and the others and was ready to leave. Li Zhangtong and the others were stunned. They could tell that Ningqi had no intention of letting them follow. Brother Ning, so you're also in Emperor Ancestor City. What a coincidence. Li Si and the others had been watching for a long time. Seeing that Ningqi was about to leave, they appeared and walked in front of Ningqi and the others. Brother Ning just arrived in Emperor Ancestor City, and you already know so many people? Mo Xie muttered in his heart. However, his and Baidi's expressions turned solemn when they saw Li Si and the others. Because Li Si and the others exuded a faint Grand Luo aura. What a coincidence! Ningqi glanced at Li Si and the others. His gaze paused on the South Sea tortoise riding old man and Tai Yuan. It's better to meet by chance. Are these Brother Ning's friends? Why don't we find a place to meet? Li Si smiled. At the same time, he secretly transmitted a voice to Ningqi. We have a clue about this dreamland. If you want to break the formation I hear, follow us. Ningqi was slightly stunned. He had a clue? Illusion? It seemed that this group of people were still the same as before, ignorant of this place, thinking that this was just a very realistic illusion. The Silver Dragon had said that this place was real and not an illusion. Naturally, there was no so-called array eye. They were able to come here because of the reincarnation matrix that had been set up in the tomb of the god of sin. Once the time was up, it would bring everyone back to the tomb of the god of sin. No need. Ningqi refused with a smile. Bai Di and the other two heaved a sigh of relief. Although Ningqi could slay a Grand Luo like Tang Gongfeng with a single slash, they could still remain calm when they were with Ningqi. However, Li Si and the others were Grand Luo after all. They felt pressured just standing a little closer to him, let alone sitting together. Li Si was taken aback by Ningqi's direct rejection. He exchanged glances with Bai Xingxue and the others. Ningqi had already left with Emperor Bai and the others. You really don't want to know where the formation eye is? Li Si continued transmitting his voice as he watched Ningqi's back. Ningqi paused slightly and glanced at the immortal monarch's residence. He then transmitted a voice to Li Si. The formation you speak of wouldn't be the immortal monarch's residence, would it? Before Li Si could show any surprise, Ningqi and the others had already vanished amidst the bustling crowd. Li Jiangtong and the other two looked at each other in disappointment, before looking at Li Si and the others. They seemed to be hesitating if they should be thick-skinned enough to walk with those Grand Luo. But when they recalled what happened in the hall, they dismissed the idea and quickly turned to leave. They were afraid that Li Si and the others would use them as sacrificial pawns to probe the illusory dreamland. Since the number one prodigy of the ancestral star isn't willing to go with us, let's not force it. Tai Yuan smiled with slight mockery. Let's go. It's not long until the grand ceremony. That's our only chance to sneak into the immortal monarch's residence. We can't miss it, Bai Xingxue said flatly. Li Si felt that he was a prodigy of the profound Azure Mansion, and yet Ningqi did not give him face time and time again. A ball of rage burned in his heart, but he hid it well and did not show it. Dong Jingyan stood in front of a few spies he had personally trained, listening to their reports on the information they had gathered on Ningqi over the past few days. Aside from drinking with those heavenly immortals, he's also acquainted with a group of Grand Luo? Have you investigated the origins of those Grand Luo? Dong Jingyan said flatly. I have, but they seem to have popped out of nowhere. There's no information on them in the ancestral star's 10 prefectures. Popped out of nowhere. I see. All of you are dismissed. Keep an eye on that kid, and don't act recklessly as long as he's in the ancestral star city. Inform me immediately if he leaves. Dong Jingyan said thoughtfully. Understood. A month passed in the blink of an eye. On this day, Ningqi saw a few immortal monarchs that he had never heard of in the future. Each immortal monarch was no weaker than Zhuoqiu immortal monarch, and had countless experts under their command. Grand Luo could only be considered as followers. There were a total of 9 immortal monarchs in the ancestral star. Apart from Zhuoqiu immortal monarch, who seemed to have a good relationship with Shengong immortal monarch and arrived a month earlier, there were a total of 5 immortal monarchs who arrived later. Ningqi had never heard of any of their names. Although he did not know how long it was between this era and the one he was in, immortal monarchs could live for at least 1,000 years. But none of these immortal monarchs existed in the future, and Shengong immortal monarch only had a single soul. His soul had also been tricked by Ningqi. Could it be that the time between these two periods was more than 1,000 years? Or did something happen in between that caused all the immortal monarchs of this era to die in battle? Is it possible that they're hiding behind the scenes like the Heavenly Dao clan? Ningqi murmured to himself, feeling that the possibility was very high. The Langya Immortal Emperor ranked first on the Immortal Emperor ranking in the future, but he should still be a nameless existence now. If he had become an Immortal Emperor, how could none of those who had ascended as Immortal Emperors be able to ascend? Chapter 2576. Don't push, don't push. Register one by one. Everyone has a share. At the entrance of the immortal monarch's estate, a figure that seemed like a butler and had a slightly furious expression spoke loudly with the voice of a duck. Even though this person had a fair complexion and seemed like a eunuch, his body carried a trace of a faintly discernible terrifying aura. The originally crowded crowd instantly quietened down, and then they started to line up in an orderly manner. The immortal monarch's estate arranged for a few tens of immortals to be in charge of registering and receiving congratulatory gifts. Seeing that everyone began to obey the order, the man turned around and left with a cold expression. This is the head manager of the immortal monarch's estate, Sword Immortal Wu Ji. He's an almighty figure at the primordial true immortal realm. I heard he was an expert in the immortal dimension, and he contributed greatly during the great war of immortals and devils. Later on, he fell into an ambush of the devil race and suffered a heavy injury. Fortunately, he was saved by Shingong, immortal monarch who was passing by. After that, he willingly stayed in ancestral Emperor City and became the manager of the immortal monarch's estate. Emo Xie transmitted his voice to Ning Qi. Ning Qi noticed that Emo Xie was looking at Sword Immortal Wuji with a hint of admiration in her eyes. Do you think Shingong, Immortal Lord, is using the opportunity of marrying off his daughter to earn money openly? Ning Qi glanced at the attendant of the Immortal Monarch's estate that was registering, and then he smiled at Emo Xie. In this short period of time, the gifts received by the Immortal Monarch's estate were innumerable. Brother Ning must be joking. How could Immortal Monarch take a fancy to these congratulatory gifts? Emo Xie was slightly stunned, and he hurriedly sent a voice transmission. Don't speak of this again after we enter the Immortal Monarch's estate. The Immortal Monarch possesses extraordinary ability, and it would be bad if he heard it. You don't like it? It should be known that water could form a sea, and sand could form a desert. There were countless people who had come to participate in the grand ceremony, not to mention the presence of immortal monarchs. The value of their gifts would definitely be extremely high. Ning Qi saw many familiar faces among the dozens of queues, such as Li Si and the others. At this moment, they were also obediently lining up. Those that were able to enter the immortal monarch's estate in advance were at least at the mysterious immortal realm or existences like the three great clans of ancestral Emperor City. Tian Wei Sek's White Emperor? The congratulatory gift is a bottle of level 3 qi raising pills. When it was Baidi's turn, the attendant of the immortal monarch's estate, who was in charge of registration, revealed a disdainful expression as he glanced at Baidi indifferently. After that, he passed a bronze token to Baidi. Your seat is on it. Don't walk around randomly once you've arrived at the immortal monarch's estate. Thank you. Emperor Bai did not seem to see the disdain in his eyes and thanked him respectfully. Emo Xie and Ji Fei were next. When it was Ning Qi's turn, the other party seemed to take a second look at Ning Qi. The token he handed to Ning Qi was different from the three emperors. It was a jade token. Did you give me the wrong plate? Ning Qi said lightly. That's right. This is arranged by the higher-ups. Go in and don't block the way. The other party waved his hand impatiently. The people lining up behind Ning Qi had sharp eyes. When they saw the jade token in Ning Qi's hand, the way they looked at Ning Qi changed. Who is that guy? Doesn't that mean that the seat of the jade token is the same as the Xian Immortals? Perhaps he's a disciple of one of the immortal monarchs. That's unlikely. If he's a disciple of an immortal monarch, why would he line up like us? Even Li Si and the others who were in another line saw this scene. Bai Shengxue just happened to register at the same time as Ning Qi, and the token in his hand was merely a token. Bai Shengxue glanced at the jade token in Ning Qi's hand with a slightly cold gaze. Brother Ning, the immortal monarch's estate actually arranged for you to sit with a Xian immortal? Since they couldn't stay at the entrance for long, Emperor Bai and the other two followed Ning Qi into the immortal monarch's estate. At the same time, they looked at the jade token in Ning Qi's hand with astonishment and seemed to have thought of something. Brother Ning, you're not being honest. Emo Xie spoke with a strange expression. Emperor Bai and Ji Fei nodded in agreement. I really don't know what's going on. Ning Qi sighed helplessly. The three of them instantly felt strange when they saw that he looked sincere and didn't seem to be lying. However, they were in the immortal monarch's estate after all, so they had to concentrate on what was in front of them so as to avoid accidentally following the wrong line and going to a place they shouldn't go. If they accidentally bumped into a great figure, then they would be in big trouble. They would be in big trouble. In next to no time, all of them arrived at a special hall. This hall was extremely tall, and there was a staircase made of white jade at the center. On both sides were spacious halls, and at this moment, these halls were filled with round tables. These halls were extremely similar to the terraced fields on Earth. There was a hall on every level, and there was a total of 33 levels. There were already many human immortals, earthly immortals, and heavenly immortals taking their seats, and the seats they were assigned were all at the lower levels. The lower 9 levels were occupied by human immortals, the 10th to 14th levels were occupied by earthly immortals, and the 15th to 18th levels were occupied by heavenly immortals. Emosia and the others were on this level. Every single level was guarded by cultivators who would check the tokens and only be seated if they met the identity required. Emosia and the others were seated on the 18th level, and when they looked down from here, they could see the dense rows of tables and immortals. The hall was enormous, and each floor could accommodate at least 50,000 immortals. The lower 9 floors were practically filled to the brim, and a rough estimate showed that there were perhaps 1,000,000 immortals seated at the banquet. The immortals seated below looked at the immortals walking up with envy in their eyes. Some of them clenched their fists tightly, and they seemed to be swearing in their hearts that one day they would be able to sit even higher, because only then could they get closer to the 33rd level and get closer to Shengong, immortal monarch. "Brother Ning, we'll sit here. You go ahead." After finding a seat, Emosia was slightly reluctant. Ning Qi smiled. "Why don't I exchange tokens with someone and sit here with all of you?" "Absolutely not. The immortal monarch's mansion has very strict rules, and you must not act recklessly." Emperor Bai hurriedly transmitted his voice. Many of the heavenly immortals who sat at the same table as Emperor Bai and the others glanced at Ning Qi with slight dissatisfaction. One of them looked like a heavenly immortal from an aristocratic family, and he said sarcastically, "It's just a seat, and you can sit according to your token. Why do you have to be so hypocritical? Brother, it seems like your cultivation isn't very high. You're just a heavenly immortal like us, but you were given a silver token because of your seniors in your family? Golden immortals were given silver tokens. For example, a Grand Luo like Li Si was given a gold token this time. The other party thought that Ning Qi was showing off in front of them, and he was slightly displeased, which was why he said that sarcastically. The rest of the heavenly immortals smirked when they heard that. "Brother Ning, this is the immortal monarch's mansion. Don't talk to them." Emperor Bai glanced at the heavenly immortal and transmitted his voice to Ning Qi. Ning Qi smiled, nodded at Emperor Bai and the others, and continued walking up. Chapter 2577. Huh? Emosia was rather displeased and gave him a sidelong glance. "Who told you that Brother Ning only got a silver plate? If it's not a silver medal, is it a gold medal?" The man did a double take before laughing coldly, although there was a hint of wariness in his eyes. If Ning Qi really did get a gold plate, then his background was not to be underestimated. His clan certainly could not compare to Ning Qi's, but with so many people present and Emosia talking to him in such a manner, he naturally had to retort or he would lose face. "You'll know when you see." The White Emperor smiled. The other heavenly immortals at the table looked at Ning Qi in surprise when they heard him, only to find that he kept going up. Someone would check his plate along the way, but they could not see if he was holding a silver or gold plate because his back was facing them. Soon, however, Ning Qi had passed the area where golden immortals were seated and reached the 24th floor where only golden immortals of Grand Luo were seated. This time, the rest of the celestial immortals at Emperor Bai's table turned pale. They secretly guessed Ning Qi's background. To be able to sit in that area with the cultivation of a celestial immortal, his background must not be simple. "Gentlemen, may I know which sect or clan this brother is from on the ancestral star? To be able to sit with a Grand Luo, he must not be weaker than the Dong family here?" The heavenly immortal who first mocked Ning Qi asked humbly with a smile on his face. Though he had mocked Ning Qi, there was actually no grudge between them. Now that he saw that Ning Qi's background was extraordinary, he naturally did not want to further offend Ning Qi and Mo Xie. Who said that Brother Ning would only sit with a Grand Luo? Mo Xie pursed his lips. The heavenly immortal and the others did a double take. Who else would he sit with if not a Grand Luo on the 24th floor? Their gazes unwittingly focused on Ning Qi again, wanting to see where he was seated. The 24th to 30th floors were all reserved for Grand Luo. Unlike the lower levels, there were not many Grand Luo seated, but it was not that few either. After all, 3,000 of the 3,000 young boys and girls Switcho Immortal Lord had brought were present, along with the Grand Luo brought by the other Immortal Lords, sects, and clans of every continent in the homeworld. There were at least 40,000 Grand Luo who had come from other immortal realms. There were already no less than 20,000 Grand Luo in their seat. Ning Qi's appearance attracted the attention of many Grand Luo. While they were guessing his identity and origins, they were not all that surprised. That was because there were dozens of geniuses who were also celestial immortals like Ning Qi sitting here, so Ning Qi was not considered to be a crane among chickens. However, when Ning Qi reached the 30th floor, the eyes of many Grand Luo twitched. Dozens of heavenly immortals who looked rather prideful could not help but look at Ning Qi in surprise. While they could sit with Grand Luo, they were only seated on the 24th floor. Ning Qi had already reached the 30th floor. Didn't this mean that Ning Qi's status was higher than theirs? Whose disciple is that? This person looks very unfamiliar. Could he be a disciple of some immortal monarch? It's possible. There was a table on the 30th floor that was filled with Grand Luo of the Dong family. Dong Jingyan and the middle-aged beauty beside him had their eyes on Ning Qi the moment he appeared. Their gazes were very calm, as if they were looking at an ordinary person, and not at all like they were looking at an enemy who had killed their son. Ning Qi's gaze turned and saw Dong Jingyan. He had learned his father's name from the White Emperor and the others after Dong Kuan's death, which was why he could not help but feel a little worried when he noticed that Dong Jingyan was looking at him rather strangely. Then, just when everyone thought that Ning Qi was going to find a seat, when he came down, Ning Qi continued walking up the white jade staircase. It was the 31st floor where only mystic immortals could sit. He got a jade plate? Where did that kid come from? How did he get to the 31st floor? Looks like he really is a personal disciple of some immortal monarch. How else would a mere heavenly immortal be seated with a mystic immortal? Almost all the Grand Luo seated from the 24th to the 30th floor were shocked, including the dozens of heavenly immortal prodigies who could only sit there because of their family or sect connections. Only Dong Jingyan and the middle-aged beauty beside him remained unfazed, as if they already knew about it. Hiss! The heavenly immortals at the table where Mo Xie and the others were seated all gasped. The heavenly immortal who had mocked Ning Qi before had a look of horror on his face. Damn it, just what kind of being did he mock? How could a heavenly immortal be seated on the 31st floor? The 31st level was only 2 levels away from the 33rd level, and every single person capable of sitting on this level was a mysterious immortal realm expert. Even if it was the disciples of the 3 great clans of Emperor City or other sects that possessed a primordial true immortal, it was impossible for them to obtain such an honor. Tich 3 brothers, is that the personal disciple of an immortal monarch? The heavenly immortal who had mocked Ning Qi before looked at Mo Xie and the others with a somewhat fawning look. Now you're scared. Mo Xie sneered. I'm scared. The other party blushed with shame. At a time like this, face and whatnot no longer mattered. Ning Qi could go to the 31st floor, and not even the patriarch of his clan could sit that high. They were not the only ones who noticed this. The human immortals, earth immortals, and other existences sitting at the bottom also had a very interesting look on their faces when they saw Ning Qi reach the 31st floor. Is that senior brother Ning? Mystic sword sex Ning Beixian? That seems to be him, those who had been sent here from the ancestral star by the reincarnation formation gaped as they watched Ning Qi ascend to the 31st floor. There were at least 500,000 immortals sent here, but only less than a tenth of them showed up in ancestral Emperor City, which was around 40 to 50,000 people. They would not miss such a big event like immortal monarch Shingong's daughter getting married. They thought that this place was an illusion, so they thought that there might be something hidden in today's grand ceremony. Something fortuitous. Senior Brother Ning is indeed the #1 genius of the ancestral star. He is doing so well even in this illusion. Hao Shuai, who was wearing a red dudu, stared blankly at Ning Qi and mumbled to himself. He only learned today that Ning Qi was also in ancestral Emperor City. He had arrived earlier, and after he sat down, the other geniuses who wanted to sit with him chose other tables when they saw him wearing a red dudu. Only those geniuses who were sent here by the reincarnation formation and were familiar with Hao Shuai ignored the strange looks from the others and sat with him. Otherwise, the awkward scene of Hao Shuai sitting alone at a table might happen. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.